The story begins on Lucheng Pedestrian Street, dated March 10. The streets are bright and bustling, filled with tall buildings covered in colorful signs. Inside a dimly lit office, a man's voice breaks the silence. He asks a question with a sharp tone. "Kid, do you know what it means to borrow 5 million yuan from me?" A plant glows faintly under the light, while in the background, several men sit around a table. One of them, Zhang Yang, the boss of the Dihai gang, and an underground moneylender in Lucheng, leans back in his chair. He smirks, explaining that his interest rates are quite high. Lighting a cigarette, he takes a slow drag before continuing. Smoke rises as his eyes narrow with amusement. Across from him sits a nervous young man, trembling as sweat runs down his face. Two large bodyguards stand behind him, their shadows falling over his chair. Trying to sound confident despite his fear, he tells brother Zhang that as long as he is willing to lend him the money, the interest rate can be as high as needed. Zhang Yang leans forward, resting his chin on his hands. His tone turns calm yet dangerous. He says all right, and tells the boy that it will be 4% daily interest. He will lend him 5 million, and he must pay back 7 million half a year later. He also tells the boy to write an IOU for 7 million first. Then Zhang Yang's eyes glint coldly, as he adds that, at the same time, he must provide collateral of equal value. The young man trembles as he nervously holds out a document. His voice shakes as he speaks, telling brother Zhang that it is his house's property deed, and asking him to take a look. Zhang Yang takes the paper and examines it with a faint smile. He comments that the house is a bit old now, and worth only about 3 to 4 million yuan at most. In his mind, he scoffs, thinking how foolish it is for someone to use a large flat apartment over 140 square meters for a high-interest loan. To him, it is like a sheep willingly walking into a wolf's den. Leaning back in his chair, Zhang Yang says with a smirk that the young man named Chen cannot borrow 5 million with just that house. He tells him plainly that the deal can't be done. Panicked, the young man clasps his hands together and pleads. He begs brother Zhang not to refuse him, saying that even 4 million yuan would be enough. He tries to sound confident, claiming he has consulted a master who said his luck is good recently, and that he would earn the money back several times over soon. Zhang Yang relaxes in his chair, resting his arms behind his head. He says he can only lend 3.5 million yuan, claiming that any more and he would lose money. Inside, he sneers to himself, thinking that the young man is nothing but a gambling fool despite his age, and now he has him completely under his control. The young man's expression brightens instantly. He thanks brother Zhang over and over, promising that he will repay the money quickly. Zhang Yang leans forward with a cold smile, resting his chin on his clasped hands. He tells the young man that since he has agreed to the terms, he must pay back 4.9 million yuan within 3 months. If he fails to do so, his house will be taken as collateral. Then, in a calm tone, he adds that if there is no problem, the young man only needs to write the IOU, and the funds will be released within 3 days. The young man nods nervously, glancing down at the paper in his hands. He says there is no problem, but hesitates for a moment, before adding that he has one condition. Zhang Yang raises an eyebrow, intrigued, and leans in slightly, asking what it is. 10 minutes later, the deal is done. Outside the building, the young man steps out smiling, clutching his documents. One of Zhang Yang's men stands by the door, seeing him off with a polite tone, saying, "Thank you for your patronage, brother Chen. Take care." The young man looks at his phone and sees a message appear on the screen. His mobile account has received 3.5 million yuan. Relief and excitement flash in his eyes. After confirming the money, the young man smiles and calls Zhang Yang an idiot. His expression darkens as his eyes glow with a faint red light. A cold smile creeps across his face. He whispers to himself that the apocalypse will descend in 1 month, and when that happens, who would be left to repay this useless loan? With the money now in his hands, he vows to prepare well this time. He does not intend to live the same miserable life he lived in his previous one. In his previous life, a catastrophic natural disaster had struck the blue star. It was a terrifying event that completely altered the planet's ecosystem. The sun unleashed a surge of violent solar radiation, and the Earth was engulfed in searing light. The global temperature soared to nearly 50 degrees Celsius, turning the world into a blazing inferno. Under the burning skies, humanity was plunged into chaos. A 30-day high-temperature apocalypse began. Cities melted, the ground cracked, and the once living world became a wasteland of fire. In the ruins, even the animals turned feral. A black wolf with glowing red eyes gnawed hungrily at the remains of a scorched human arm. Meanwhile, back in the present, Zhang Yang laughed loudly in his office, holding the signed contract. He couldn't believe how easily the young man had agreed to raise the interest rate just to get the money faster. His laughter echoed as he mocked, saying that gambling dogs like him didn't deserve a house anyway. One of his subordinates approached him, looking puzzled. The man hesitated before speaking, pointing out that the young man's house was worth over 4 million, yet he had accepted only 3.5 million without hesitation. The subordinate frowned and asked if there might be some kind of trick behind it. But Zhang Yang leaned back in his chair with a sly grin, his eyes gleaming under the dim light. He told his subordinate not to worry, saying he had seen plenty of gambling addicts before, people so desperate they would sell their own families for money. Compared to that, one house meant nothing. With a calculating tone, he ordered his man to contact the casino and rig the gambling results. When the time came, not only would they claim the house, but they also wouldn't let the borrower escape. He told him to sell anything valuable the man owned. The subordinate nodded eagerly and replied that he understood. The scene shifted to the city skyline glowing under the setting sun, where the tall HK Mall building stood against the horizon. The young man walked alone down the street, the orange light reflecting off his hoodie. He glanced at his phone and smirked. He thought to himself that there were still many good people in the world. All it took was a small increase in interest rates for that fool to hand over the money immediately. He chuckled softly, wondering if the man truly believed he could outsmart him. Calling the loan shark an old fool, he reminded himself that he had borrowed high-interest loans from every lender in Lucheng within a single day. He scoffed at the thought, confident that a mere rate hike meant nothing to him. As his eyes glowed faintly red, his smirk deepened. He declared that once the money was in his hands, no one should dream of ever getting it back. Then his thoughts darkened, as memories of his previous life resurfaced. The earth drying up, vegetation dying, and living creatures mutating. Civilization had crumbled, and humanity descended into chaos. Resources became scarce, forcing people to abandon morality, doing whatever it took just to survive. As the world descended into chaos, possessing resources became equivalent to possessing supreme wealth. Resources had become so scarce that people resorted to ruthless and violent means just to secure a small amount of survival materials. Even former billionaires and once famous stars were reduced to beggars. They had to kneel and plead for something as small as a sausage or a single cup of water. Those who couldn't secure resources were left to wander the streets aimlessly, eventually meeting a miserable death in the wastelands of the fallen world. But now, everything was different. The young man had been reborn. He still had time before the disaster struck, enough time to prepare in advance, to seize what he needed before the world burned again. He lowered his hand, touching his face as a chilling smile formed. His eyes glimmered with cold determination, and faint sparks of red flickered around him. Moments later, while walking through the city, he heard laughter from a nearby cafe. He turned his head slightly, his sharp gaze shifting toward the sound. Inside a brightly lit dessert shop, two women chatted excitedly near the counter. Chen immediately remembered that this was the shop that carried the legendary Shugao assassin, a luxury ice cream said to be even more expensive than Haagen-Dazs, known as the noble among ice creams. Seeing this, the young man's gaze sharpened. His expression turned serious as he looked toward the counter, a flicker of recognition crossing his eyes. Memories from his past life surfaced. He remembered how he had always been reluctant to buy that extravagant treat for himself, yet he had purchased it multiple times for Lu Wancheng. He clenched his jaw, thinking bitterly that giving such an expensive dessert to her had been a greater waste than feeding it to a dog. The more he thought about it, the more frustration boiled inside him. His heart ached with regret, and he suddenly burst out, declaring that he would enjoy it himself this time. Charging toward the counter with determined steps, he slammed his hand down and spoke loudly to the staff, his tone confident and unrestrained. He asked for 10 of every flavor of ice cream available in the shop. Hearing that, the people around him gasped in surprise. One of the women exclaimed in disbelief, wondering if he could really afford that much. Another, eyes wide, whispered that the way he made the order looked incredibly cool. Meanwhile, the young man stood calmly with one hand against his chin, thinking to himself, this time he would indulge in everything he had once denied himself. The shop attendant looked startled as she hesitated behind the counter. She stared at the young man in disbelief, thinking that although he was handsome, he didn't look rich at all. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked if he was serious about his order. Trying to confirm, she explained that their shop only sold high-end ice cream, and that 10 of each flavor would cost more than 20,000 yuan. She asked again, unsure if he really wanted to proceed. Nearby, a woman with long red hair sneered after overhearing the conversation. With a mocking smile, she said that someone like him, dressed so plainly, couldn't possibly afford such luxury. She laughed arrogantly and added that if he truly managed to pay for it, she would kowtow to him in public. The young man's eyes narrowed as he turned toward her. His tone calm but sharp. He asked if the words she had just said were true. The woman's smile faltered, her expression turning defensive. She snapped back, asking if he really expected her to bow to him, demanding to know what kind of person he thought he was to act so arrogantly. But the young man only smirked, his expression turning cold and confident. He told her that he was offering her a way out, but since she insisted on provoking him, she would definitely end up kowtowing. His voice lowered as he added with chilling certainty that not even God could stop it now, he had already spoken it into existence. The woman's face twisted in anger as she shouted at him, but the young man only smiled faintly, unfazed by her outburst. Turning toward the counter, he calmly instructed the shop attendant to pack all the ice cream in the store, saying that he would take everything. As the staff hesitated, he pulled out his phone and displayed his account balance, a staggering 20 million yuan. The woman's confident expression froze instantly, while the attendant's eyes widened in shock. Trembling, she stammered that she needed to confirm with her manager, and quickly hurried away. Moments later, the store manager arrived, bowing politely. He introduced himself as Fei Qi and asked what Mr. Chen required. The young man looked relaxed, his tone composed as he told the manager to calculate the total price of all the ice cream in the store and added casually that they wouldn't need to open for business today. Hearing this, Manager Fei blinked in disbelief, but quickly nodded with a respectful smile. He told the young man to wait for a moment as he checked the inventory, secretly astonished. He muttered to himself, wondering what kind of big shot would buy up an entire month's sales revenue in one go. He thought about how few people ever purchased such expensive ice cream. Most customers only came to admire it. After a brief calculation, the manager returned and announced that the merchandise currently on display was worth 70,000 yuan, while the total stock, including the inventory, was around 1 million yuan. Hearing this, the young man smirked slightly. He thought to himself that it wasn't all that expensive after all. Since the apocalypse was coming anyway, he might as well empty their entire stock after all. If the world ended, he could simply sit at home and enjoy his ice cream in peace. Chen Xiao calmly told the manager that he would transfer a deposit of 300,000 yuan first, and instructed him to deliver all the ice cream from their inventory to his address as soon as possible. The manager's eyes widened in surprise but quickly turned into excitement. He eagerly nodded and assured Chen Xiao that everything would be handled right away, calling him Brother Chen, with sudden respect. With a slight smile, Chen Xiao turned toward the group of women standing nearby. His voice was calm but confident as he said they could choose any ice cream they liked from the store. Everything was on him. The women gasped in shock. One of them exclaimed happily that Chen Xiao was paying for it all, while another blurted out in disbelief at how rich he was. Their faces lit up with excitement as they admired him, whispering that he looked even more handsome now. Chen Xiao stood tall with a relaxed grin, his arms open in a confident gesture. Then his expression shifted slightly as he turned his gaze toward the red-haired woman who had mocked him earlier. His tone turned sharp as he reminded her that his offer excluded her. He was still waiting for her to keep her word and kowtow to him. The woman froze, her confidence vanishing. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak but only managed to stammer weakly. Moments later, unable to bear the humiliation, she dropped to her knees before him, bowing her head low to the ground. Chen Xiao looked down at her with a calm smile, standing tall and composed as the others stared in stunned silence. He then looked calmly ahead, his eyes half-lidded, and his voice steady as he remarked that the woman should have known better than to show off. The scene then shifted to a peaceful view of a riverside lined with cherry blossom trees, petals drifting gently through the air under the glow of a warm sunset. Chen Xiao sat on a wooden bench, holding a popsicle in one hand, and taking a bite with a relaxed smile. He nodded to himself and commented that the ice cream, fittingly named Assassin, truly lived up to its reputation. Its taste and texture were exceptional. As he leaned back, he muttered softly while eating, but midway through his words, he lifted his hand. A sudden surge of blue light appeared, twisting the air in front of him. A dark, square-shaped portal shimmered into existence, surrounded by glowing energy lines. Chen Xiao explained to himself that his ability could keep anything inside it perfectly preserved, allowing him to enjoy fresh ice cream anytime he wanted. He smiled, amused by the thought, and casually flicked a small blue bag into the glowing portal. With a confident tone, he said that with this power, inviting over any star or young model wouldn't be a problem. Just thinking about it made him feel excited. Chen Xiao raised his hand as a black, glowing square appeared before him. He looked at it thoughtfully, his voice calm as he said that he hadn't expected his ability to be reborn along with him. He recalled that, in his previous life, abilities had only started awakening gradually after the apocalypse began. A faint smile appeared on his lips as he gazed at the mysterious power hovering above his palm. He admitted that he didn't fully understand how it worked, but he knew one thing for certain: this would become his greatest trump card in the days to come. He then sat back down on the bench under the cherry blossoms, petals drifting around him as the evening light glowed softly. In a quiet tone, he said that it was time to start preparing for what lay ahead, building a safe house, setting up cold storage, gathering weapons, and securing an energy reserve. With a small sigh, he muttered that he still had a lot to do. Just then, his phone suddenly chimed with a ringtone announcing, "Little Fairy is calling." Chen Xiao blinked in surprise and turned his head slightly. He pulled out his phone and frowned when he saw the name flashing on the screen, Liu Wancheng. His expression darkened as he muttered that it was her again, calling it bad luck. Chen Xiao paused when he saw the name, Liu Wancheng, glowing faintly in the darkness. After Chen Xiao's parents passed away, Liu Wanqing appeared in his life like a savior. In his grief and loneliness, he saw her as a source of warmth and light, someone who reached out a helping hand when the world felt empty. Back then, he was too naive to realize her true intentions. To him, she seemed like the light that had entered his dark world. But in reality, what she was after wasn't him, it was the inheritance his parents had left behind. Their relationship soon became one built on lies and manipulation. Chen Xiao remembered her sitting close to him, whispering softly that her mother insisted on certain conditions if he truly wanted to marry her. She told him that the large, fully paid apartment in the city center had to be written under her name, along with a bride price of 880,000 yuan. He complied, blinded by love. Yet it felt like falling into a bottomless pit. She kept asking for more, reaching again and again until all his savings were drained. Even that wasn't enough. She began pushing him to sell his ancestral home, just so she could have another luxury apartment in the city. When he hesitated, her tone turned manipulative, saying it was for their future, that his old family house wasn't worth keeping anyway. Then Chen Xiao's memories darkened. He remembered being forced down, humiliated and helpless as greed consumed her. Later, she stood beside another man in a dark room, smiling coldly as she introduced Chen Xiao like an object. She told the man, whom she addressed as young master, that Chen Xiao was the one she had mentioned before, the one who perfectly met the man's special material requirements. At that moment, Chen Xiao finally understood. The woman he once thought of as his savior had sold him out for her own gain. Chen Xiao's eyes burned with fury as memories of his past life resurfaced. When the apocalypse descended, chaos consumed the world. He had risked everything, his safety, his future, to protect Liu Wanqing. But in the end, she betrayed him without hesitation. To cling to someone stronger, she had sold him off like livestock. He remembered the cold floor, the smell of blood, and the shadow looming over him. His body trembled as the figure above observed him with detached curiosity, muttering that there was nothing particularly special about him. Then the man wondered aloud if he needed to eat him to see any real result. Chen Xiao's fate back then had been cruel beyond words. His voice echoed bitterly in his thoughts. In the end, he hadn't even been left with a complete corpse. Now, standing under the pale light with red eyes glowing faintly, Chen Xiao held his phone tightly, his expression dark yet calm. A sinister smile curved across his lips as he looked at the name on the screen. He whispered coldly that since Liu Wanqing had run right into him again, it was time to properly settle the score. The scene shifted to a tall, luxurious building glimmering under the golden sunset, a high-end hotel. Inside, the sound of soft footsteps echoed across the floor. It was Liu Wanqing. Chen Xiao answered the call and asked gently if she had called him and whether something was the matter. Inside a brightly lit bathroom, Liu Wanqing stood in front of the mirror, her hair wrapped in a towel and a silk robe loosely tied around her. Speaking sweetly into her phone, she told Chen on the other end that she had been out playing with friends and had accidentally lost a gold necklace she really loved. She sighed dramatically, saying how heartbroken she felt about it. On the other side of the call, Chen Xiao's voice came through, calm yet laced with an unsettling tone. He spoke softly, asking what else he could possibly do. Of course, he said, he would buy his dearest darling a new one. His voice deepened into a faintly mocking tone as he added that one wasn't enough. She could buy 10 and wear them alternately if she wished. Hearing that, Liu Wanqing blinked in surprise at his sudden generosity. Her expression softened slightly, curiosity mixing with disbelief. She asked when he had suddenly become so generous. Calmly, Chen Xiao told her he had been lucky lately, that he had invested a bit in virtual currency and made a small profit. Of course, he added smoothly, when he earned money, he had to spend it on his darling. Hearing that, suspicion flashed across her face as she asked if he had fallen for some kind of scam, mentioning that virtual currencies were infamous for being unreliable. Chen Xiao's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He replied that whether it was a scam or not didn't matter. What mattered was whether he could make money in the next round. He said that small games were boring, and this time he planned to play big. Then his tone shifted subtly, becoming more serious. He mentioned that he was preparing to borrow a large amount of capital to invest even more. The loan, he explained, required a witness. Speaking with a dark smile forming on his face, he asked her to help him out, promising that once the deal was done, he would give her 5% of the loan amount as payment for her hard work. While Lu Wanqing stood in her bathrobe, hearing Chen's plan, a man's voice suddenly questioned her from nearby. He asked why she was taking so long, wondering what was making her drag her feet. Lu Wanqing immediately hid her phone and turned toward the man with a composed expression. She quickly smiled, stepping closer with a playful tone. Wrapping her arm around him, she called him honey, telling him sweetly that she would be ready soon, and asking him to wait for her. As she leaned against the older man, her eyes glimmered with calculation. Inwardly, she thought about how spending one night with this old man only earned her 5,000, yet Chen Xiao's offer for signing a document would give her 50,000. To her, it seemed like an easy choice. She dismissed any thought of risk, reasoning that it was only a signature. Besides, she believed Chen Xiao was too much of a coward to dare deceive her. A moment later, the call between them ended. Chen Xiao looked down at his phone screen, which displayed call ended. A faint, dark smile spread across his face, as his crimson eyes glowed with determination. He whispered coldly to himself, saying that he would wait for Lu Wanqing. Chen Xiao's voice continued in the background. He said quietly that it was now time to build his fortress. He met an architect, and, with a commanding tone, pointed to the building site, and ordered that within 1 month, he wanted the place transformed into an impenetrable fortress. Chen Xiao stood in front of the building, his eyes sharp as he began listing out detailed construction plans. He explained that the windows would need to be made of bulletproof composite glass with invisible anti-theft mesh, and the walls reinforced into 3-meter-thick bulletproof exteriors. The entire structure needed to withstand earthquakes with a resistance rating of 8 or higher. He pointed upward, his expression confident, adding that the roof would be completely paved with solar panels and have an independent power generation system. To maintain air quality, it would also include an air purification and filtration system to block any external toxic gases. The architect standing before him, a man in glasses holding a laptop, began nervously reading from his notes. He explained that the fortress would include an independent ecological system capable of supplying 72 hours of oxygen and water circulation. It would also have explosion-proof doors, and the entry would require dual verification, both biometric recognition and a mechanical lock. Chen Xiao's voice grew firm as he summarized the plan, declaring that within 1 month, the entire building must be rebuilt into an impact-resistant fortress, equipped with a complete life support system. The architect stared at him, stunned by the absurd request. His thoughts raced as he wondered if Chen Xiao was some sort of doomsday prepper or just delusional from watching too many sci-fi movies. Chen Xiao narrowed his eyes, stepping closer and asking if the architect couldn't handle the job. He reminded him that his resume claimed he was a defense master who had designed bunkers for top billionaires. The man stammered nervously, adjusting his glasses as sweat ran down his temple. He admitted that Mr. Chen's requirements were indeed unique and of extremely high quality, but hesitated, mentioning that the main issue would be the budget. The architect pushed his glasses up, a sly grin spreading across his face as he thought to himself that Chen was just another rich fool brainwashed by doomsday theories, someone with too much money burning a hole in his pocket. But his expression shifted dramatically the moment Chen showed him the transfer confirmation on his phone. His eyes widened, and he almost stumbled backward in shock. Chen had already deposited 1 million as a down payment, saying calmly that the final payment could be named by the architect himself. Hearing that, the architect froze for a second, then burst with excitement. He shouted that the final payment would be whatever price he chose. Inwardly, he was overjoyed, thinking he had struck gold. He couldn't believe his luck. 1 job with this rich idiot, and he could achieve financial freedom. Chen, however, smiled with quiet confidence and reminded him that while he didn't care about the price, he did care about the quality of the work. He warned the architect to make sure the final inspection passed, because he valued solid materials and precision above all else. The 2 men leaned forward, shaking hands with forced smiles. The air between them felt like a clash of opposing flames. Chen's aura burning with fiery determination, while the architect's greed gleamed cold and sharp. Inwardly, the architect had his own plan. He decided to fleece Chen for all he was worth. Meanwhile, Chen thought to himself that he was going to make full use of this man's skills, laughing silently that once the apocalypse hit, the architect would have no way of finding him for the final payment. Later that night, Chen sat deep in thought. He said that with the fortress plan secured, the next step was gathering supplies, medicine, food, and daily necessities. Those were easy to handle, but there was something else that worried him more. Chen's mind echoed with a grim realization. He thought to himself that the most dangerous thing during the apocalypse wouldn't be natural disasters, but human nature itself once order was gone. In his vision, chaos and violence flashed before him. A monstrous shadow loomed with glowing red eyes, representing humanity's cruelty when laws collapsed. He muttered that cold weapons could easily be bought from hardware stores, but firearms, the kind capable of delivering a fatal blow, were much harder to obtain. Later that day, Chen walked alone through the quiet city streets, checking his phone with a focused look. A message appeared from an unknown contact. It read, "First-hand source, secretive channels, not what you can't think of, but what you can't find. Honest transaction, safety first." He quickly typed a reply asking, "How to buy?" Moments later, another message appeared on his screen, saying they would send him the address via private message. 8 p.m. tonight, no waiting for latecomers. That night, Chen walked through the dimly lit streets toward the meeting place. The air was cold, and the road was empty except for the faint glow of streetlights. He murmured to himself, wondering how much the seller wanted and where they should meet. Just as he continued walking under the blue streetlight, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed behind him. Several figures were approaching fast. A woman sprinted through the dark alley, her breathing heavy and desperate. Behind her, several men were in pursuit, shouting angrily for her to stop. Their voices echoed through the narrow streets as they hurled insults, demanding that she halt and calling her names. The woman's eyes were filled with fear, but she kept running without looking back. Her long hair whipped behind her as the sound of footsteps grew louder, but before they could catch up, the woman suddenly collided with someone standing at the corner. It was Chen. She immediately hid behind him. One of the men yelled again, his tone filled with rage, mocking her for trying to escape. "Keep running then," he shouted, before sneering, "You think you can cheat in my territory? You must be tired of living." Without hesitation, she clung to Chen's arm, trembling as she pleaded, asking him to please save her. Chen turned his head sharply, his expression shifting from confusion to shock when he saw her face clearly. Recognition flashed in his eyes. He muttered in disbelief, his heart pounding. "Is that her? Li Yu? How is she? In a place like this?" Under the cold blue glow of a streetlight, a group of thugs surrounded Li Yu. One of them held her firmly by the arm, while another swung a metal bat, pointing it threateningly toward Chen, who stood a few steps away. The gang leader, a man with blonde-streaked hair, glared furiously and shouted orders. Li Yu struggled desperately, her voice trembling as she cried out, her hair disheveled and her face twisted in pain. Seeing this, Chen's eyes darkened, and he muttered her name under his breath, Li Yu. Memories flickered through Chen's mind. Images of their school days resurfaced. He remembered her clearly, the academic goddess from middle school, the girl countless boys had admired from afar. Back then, she was bright, confident, and full of promise. Now, standing before him, she was a shadow of that memory, bruised, trembling, and pleading for help. Chen's jaw tightened, his gaze cold and focused. The tension in the alley thickened. It was clear that he was no longer just a bystander. His expression hardened as he listened to the thug gripping her hair and shouting in rage, demanding that she hand over the money. "Otherwise," the man growled, yanking her head back, "don't even think about leaving." One of the thugs, a man with blonde-streaked hair, sneered with a twisted grin as he spoke to his bald companion. He suggested that there was no point in wasting time talking. If the woman couldn't pay, he said mockingly, she could simply pay with her body. His tone was filled with cruelty and amusement. Before they could act further, a calm but firm voice cut through the night. Chen stepped forward, his expression cold and his presence commanding. A faint green light shimmered around him as he told them to let her go. The men turned, startled by the interruption. The woman's captor hesitated, still gripping her by the hair, while the others exchanged glances. The leader frowned, irritation flashing across his face, and shouted angrily, "Where did this reckless kid come from, trying to play the hero in front of me? I'll cripple you first. He lunged forward with fury, his fist swinging toward Chen with deadly intent. But in that instant, Chen's eyes narrowed, a chilling red gleam flashing in his gaze. In a blur of motion, Chen moved faster than the thug could react. His body turned sharply, and before the attacker could finish his swing, Chen dodged and got into a perfect position to counterattack. Chen's hand shot out, grabbing the attacker's wrist mid-swing. A sharp crack echoed through the alley, halting the assault in an instant. The bald man screamed in agony, shouting that his hand was broken. Before he could react further, Chen's expression turned cold. His red eyes glowed faintly as he lunged forward with terrifying speed. His fist struck the man squarely, sending him flying backward and crashing into the ground. Just as the alley fell silent, a glowing blue system window appeared before Chen, displaying detection of intense negative emotions. Fear plus severe pain, anger. A moment later, another notification flickered. Negative emotion harvesting system has activated successfully. Chen Xiao stood amidst the swirling smoke, a faint smile crossing his lips as he reacted with surprise. He realized that this strange system hadn't existed in his previous life. Suddenly, one of the thugs grabbed the silver-haired woman, pulling her close and pressing a weapon to her neck. With a crazed expression, he shouted for Chen Xiao not to move, threatening to kill her if he did. Before Chen Xiao could react, a man suddenly appeared and threw a brick directly at the thug. The brick slammed into the man's face, sending him flying backward as he smashed through debris, bricks and dust scattering through the air. The woman gasped in shock, barely believing what she had seen. The remaining two thugs froze, their eyes widening in horror as a heavy block of debris landed right beside them, making them flinch in fear. Just then, a new figure appeared at the end of the alley. He stepped forward with a cocky grin and mocked the scene, saying it was shameful for a group of grown men to gang up on a single girl. Enraged by the taunt, one of the bald thugs raised his bat, charging forward furiously while shouting that they were asking for death. The thugs rushed in, swinging their weapons recklessly. Chen Xiao moved first, his expression calm but sharp. With a swift motion, he deflected one attack, his hands striking with precise force. At the same time, the new boy launched a powerful kick, sending another thug flying backward. The alley echoed with heavy impacts as bodies hit the ground one after another. Chen Xiao's eyes glowed faintly red, his movements too fast for the eye to follow. In an instant, he appeared in front of another thug and delivered a clean, devastating punch that sent the man reeling. Working in perfect sync, both men struck at the same time. Chen Xiao's fist slammed into one attacker's jaw, while his companion's kick sent another crashing onto the pavement. As the last remaining thug staggered, Chen Xiao clicked his tongue in mild annoyance before finishing him with a single decisive blow. The man collapsed to the ground, gasping in pain as Chen Xiao's foot pressed down on his chest, leaving the entire street silent. Chen Xiao and the new boy stood tall under the streetlights, their feet pressing down on the fallen thugs. The defeated men groaned in pain, unable to move. Chen Xiao's red eyes narrowed slightly as he muttered a single word, "Scram." Hearing that, the thugs panicked, scrambling to their feet and fleeing in terror. As they ran, a system notification appeared before Chen Xiao's eyes, stating that he had gained 1 fear, 1 panic, 1 severe pain, 1 despair, and 1 humiliation point. Another notification followed, informing Chen that his negative emotion value had exceeded 10 for the first time. Space expansion permission unlocked. A third notification appeared, urging Chen to work hard to harvest, grow bigger, and become stronger. As the men disappeared into the distance, Chen glanced at the fading system window and smirked faintly. Harvest negative emotions? Interesting, he murmured. Moments later, the purple-haired girl he had saved looked up at him, her voice trembling with relief. She thanked him, saying she hadn't expected to meet him there. Chen Xiao extended a hand toward her, his tone softening slightly, as he asked if she was hurt. He then handed his jacket to the girl, telling her to put it on. She looked at him, her expression gentle with gratitude, and thanked him sincerely. She explained that she had something urgent to do and needed to leave right away. Chen Xiao simply nodded and told her to be careful. After she left, the man in the colorful shirt grinned and stepped forward, teasingly calling Chen Xiao a hero for saving a beautiful woman. He introduced himself as Mu Chang and asked for Chen Xiao's name. Chen Xiao replied calmly, saying that he was the one who had arranged to meet Mu Chang. Hearing that, Mu Chang's eyes widened in surprise before he burst into laughter, calling it fate that they had run into each other. Then, striking a dramatic pose, Mu Chang shouted his code phrase, "Heavenly King covers Earth Tiger." Chen Xiao raised an eyebrow and looked at him with a straight face, replying, "You are 250. Mu Chang froze in confusion, completely dumbfounded. Just then, the system suddenly activated in Chen Xiao's mind. A glowing blue window appeared above Mu Chang's head, displaying detection of intense negative emotions. Dumbfounded, +1. Bewilderment, +1. Embarrassment, +1. Chen Xiao was shocked to see this and stared at Mu Chang in awkward silence, the atmosphere turning strangely comical. Chen Xiao raised his hand playfully and shouted with a grin, jokingly saying, "Pagoda suppresses river demon." He told Mu Chang not to mind it, saying he was just making a little joke to lighten the mood. Hearing that, Mu Chang's face twisted in disbelief, his tone filled with both frustration and amusement as he shouted back, "Damn it, brother, that joke of yours, you're ruthless, follow me." The scene then shifted to a quiet night outside a 2-story house, its windows glowing warmly under the streetlight. Inside, Mu Chang handed Chen Xiao a wooden box. Inside were a pistol, several bullets, and a magazine neatly arranged. Mu Chang explained that it was a sturdy Russian-made gun, durable and reliable, but warned that there weren't many bullets, so he should use them sparingly. Chen Xiao inspected the weapon calmly, while Mu Chang continued with a grin, saying that since Chen Xiao's skills were impressive, and he seemed like an interesting guy, he would offer it at a friendship price, considering it as making a new friend. Chen Xiao smiled faintly and replied, "Not bad, thanks." As Mu Chang watched closely, he noted how skillfully Chen Xiao handled the gun, his movements smooth and precise. His sharp eyes narrowed as he muttered to himself that the man was clearly an expert. Since everything checked out, there was no problem. Then Chen Xiao turned slightly, his tone casual yet teasing. He asked Mu Chang with a smirk whether the gun came with a free suppressor, if there was a warranty card, and whether he could maybe throw in another box of bullets. Hearing that, Mu Chang's eyes widened in shock, completely caught off guard by the unexpected remark. Mu Chang's expression froze in disbelief. He shouted inwardly that it was already a friendship price and demanded to know if Chen Xiao even understood what that meant. Frustrated, he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, thinking that people were paying double the price for this gun on the black market, yet this guy still wanted a warranty and free extras. His anger spiked as he glared at Chen Xiao, his thoughts screaming that it felt like Chen was treating the deal as if he were buying home appliances. He almost wanted to yell for Chen Xiao to just rob him instead. At that moment, the system activated again in Chen Xiao's mind. Detection of intense negative emotions, shock +1, heartache +1, speechless +1. Seeing this, Chen Xiao simply smiled and waved his hand casually. He told Mu Chang that if it wasn't possible, then never mind. He was only asking. He said he would stick to the original price and transferred the money immediately. Mu Chang stood there, speechless, as Chen Xiao calmly finalized the transaction. Now Chen's supplies and the gun were secured. It was time to get revenge. Outside, the scene shifted to a brightly lit building beneath the night sky, the moon glowing overhead. Inside, under a dazzling chandelier, a woman in a red dress stood silently by the window. Her long blonde hair flowed down her back as city lights reflected through the glass behind her. She was Liu Wanqing. Wearing the red dress, she complained softly, asking why Chen had taken so long to arrive. She said her legs were tired from standing, and nervously asked whether the thing he had mentioned earlier truly involved no risk. Chen smiled and pulled her close, his tone smooth and reassuring. He told her it was just a formality, and that he adored her too much to ever deceive her. Hearing this, Liu Wanqing leaned back with a cigarette between her fingers, her expression turning sly. She thought to herself that Chen was just a gullible fool who had nearly sold his blood once just to buy her a handbag. She smirked, convinced that he was too infatuated to ever betray her. Then they went inside. In the room, Zhang Yang sat across from her, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He praised her confidence and said with a grin that her signature was beautiful. Liu Wanqing smiled faintly, unaware of the trap she had just walked into. Zhang Yang, wearing a cunning smile, watched as her signature appeared on the contract. Inwardly, he mocked her, thinking that she believed she was only signing as a guarantor, when in truth, once her name was written, the entire debt would belong to her. As she signed, the scheming man's thoughts grew darker. He thought that once she failed to repay the debt, she would have no choice but to pay with her body. He grinned through a puff of smoke, murmuring to himself with a sinister laugh that when she couldn't repay, that would be when his fun began. Across the room, she stood before Chen Xiao, unaware of his calm expression as he watched her. Inwardly, Chen Xiao smirked and told her silently to go ahead and sign the so-called indentured servitude contract. He thought that her greed would perfectly cover the final payment for his safe house, Everything went unexpectedly smoothly, and he quietly thanked Liu Wanqing in his mind for making things so easy. Later that night, Chen Xiao stood outside a newly constructed building beside the architect, who proudly gestured toward it. He assured Chen that everything inside was reinforced to 120% of military standards, complete with heat insulation, soundproofing, explosion resistance, and anti-drilling layers. He boasted that the house could even withstand several nuclear bombs. Chen Xiao inspected the structure and nodded in approval. With a faint smile, he commented that the quality was good. The man, wearing dark sunglasses, grinned widely and said Chen could come back anytime if he needed more work done. Afterward, Chen Xiao sat alone in his new home, placing a case on the table as the television played in the background. The news anchor's voice filled the room, reporting that due to unprecedented, super-strong solar flare activity, the world was about to experience continuous extreme high-temperature weather on a global scale. The broadcast continued, warning that temperatures across many regions would soon break all historical records, urging every citizen to prepare for protection. As the reporter's voice echoed faintly in the background, Chen Xiao wrapped a cloth around the barrel of his gun, his grip tightening. He lifted the weapon and pressed it against his temple with a faint smile, whispering a single word, "Finally." His crimson eyes sharpened with determination. The reflection of burning light danced within them as he turned toward the massive window, his expression calm and resolute. The golden-orange light from outside cast a fiery glow across his face as he muttered quietly, "It's here." Outside, the sky was engulfed in a blinding inferno. A colossal, sun-like flare loomed over the city skyline, flooding the world in crimson light. Chen Xiao stood before it in silence, gun in hand, watching as the fiery apocalypse began to descend upon the world. Just then, a news anchor appeared on the screen, reporting that a super-strong solar flare outbreak was causing severe disturbances in Earth's ionosphere. She explained that extremely high temperatures were appearing across many parts of the world, with daytime highs expected to reach 45 degrees Celsius. She advised all citizens to take heat prevention measures and avoid going out at noon unless absolutely necessary. Chen listened to the broadcast. Sweat ran down his face as he watched quietly. He noted that the temperature was already rising, but he knew it was only the beginning. Outside, the city buildings glowed under the harsh sunlight. Heat shimmered in the air. A woman wiped sweat from her face, panting in discomfort. She leaned over her balcony and complained loudly that it was already unbearably hot so early in the morning. She groaned that the weather was killing them and wondered how long the heat wave would continue. At the market, a vendor shouted through a megaphone to the neighbors. He warned them that the deadly weather would become even hotter next week. He announced a supply shortage and said that water and electricity would soon be rationed. He urged everyone to stock up immediately, warning that they wouldn't even have bottled water to drink later. He waved his megaphone and told them to hurry, saying this was his last batch of goods. The shopkeeper wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. He thought to himself that this heat wave was basically money being delivered right to his doorstep, and he'd be a fool not to profit from it. Nearby, a woman complained while holding a watermelon. She told the seller that his watermelons were too expensive and asked if he could lower the price. Another woman stood beside her, also sweating from the heat. When the seller looked at the women, his eyes sparkled with excitement. His face turned red as he stared at them, completely captivated. He hurried over with a smile, saying the melons were very sweet, and asking if they wanted to taste one. He then offered a deal. If they bought 2, he would give them a 20% discount and include a pack of tissues for free. The women stepped back nervously. One of them quickly replied that buying 1 melon was enough. The seller leaned forward eagerly, telling them that if the nights were too hot, they could always visit his place and enjoy the air conditioning. Flustered, the woman repeated that they would only buy 1. The seller insisted again, telling them to buy more and stock up because the heat was getting worse, and there might not be any fruit left to sell tomorrow. Just then, from behind, an old man pointed at the water bottles and asked the shop owner if he could make the water cheaper. The owner stubbornly refused, saying it was a small business and there would be no bargaining. Outside the store, the shop owner wiped sweat from his face while carrying a box. Behind him, Chen walked past, watching silently. Chen narrowed his eyes as he saw that shopkeeper. He immediately recognized him as Li Dafu, who was being troublesome again. Chen remembered that in his past life, inside Li Dafu's shop, he had crouched down to pick something up from the floor. Li Dafu stood behind him with his arms folded, looking down suspiciously. Just as Chen touched that thing, Li Dafu shouted loudly for everyone to come and look. He accused Chen of stealing, and claimed he had caught him red-handed. Chen shook his head in panic. He said he didn't steal anything, and only wanted to pick up the item because it had fallen to the ground. Li Dafu mocked him, asking if he could really be that kind-hearted. Li Dafu grabbed Chen's arm tightly. Chen cried out as he was pulled up. Li Dafu glanced at Chen's clothes and sneered, saying that just by looking at how shabbily he was dressed, he could tell that Chen had sticky fingers. He demanded that Chen pay up, or he would send him straight to the police station. The crowd surrounding them began whispering among themselves. Some adults clicked their tongues, saying that someone so young should know better, and questioning why he would steal. Another voice remarked that they couldn't understand how his parents had raised him. Someone else pointed out that his silence meant he must be admitting the crime. Chen lowered his head, sweat running down his cheek as he trembled. In a small voice, he insisted that he hadn't stolen anything. Back in the present, remembering all that, Chen pushed through the crowd with a calm expression. He walked forward slowly. Suddenly, something caught Chen's attention, and he looked to his side. Inside the store, a display of Ace potato chips stood with a sign that read, "Store Manager's Recommendation, 50 yuan per pack." Li Dafu, who was running the shop, stood nearby, looking annoyed as he overheard complaints. Chen questioned him, asking if the chips were made of gold or if they could somehow prevent heat stroke, wondering why they were priced so high. Li Dafu glared intensely, sweat beading on his face as he held several water bottles against his side. His expression twisted with anger and suspicion. A system window suddenly appeared, flickering with streams of numbers. It reported that Boss Li's strong negative emotions had been detected. Disgust, Li Dafu then rushed forward, shouting furiously. He yelled that anyone who couldn't afford the goods shouldn't touch them, demanding to know if Chen could even pay for anything he might break. His arm swung as he tried to snatch the bag away. Just then, another system window flashed into existence, noting Boss Li's strong negative emotions, irritation, +6. Chen stood unfazed, looking back with a calm, sharp smile. He asked Boss Li if he could really sleep at night while hoarding so many treasures. He warned him jokingly to watch out for thieves. Boss Li froze for a moment, speechless, a drop of sweat rolling down his tense face. Then, an angry Li Dafu pointed a shaking finger at Chen and shouted. He demanded to know who Chen was cursing, warning that he would beat him if he didn't stop. He called him a coward and asked if the heat had made him lose his mind. As Li Dafu raged, Chen lifted his hand calmly. He told Boss Li to calm down and then asked if he had been experiencing insomnia, strange dreams, soreness in his lower back and knees, night sweats, and fatigue recently. Hearing this, Boss Li hesitated. He admitted that he had experienced those symptoms a bit. Boss Li then wondered aloud if his warehouse really had feng shui problems. Hearing that, Chen clicked his tongue and stepped closer with a serious look. He pointed at Boss Li's forehead and said that it was dark. He grabbed Boss Li's face from the side and added that his eyes were unfocused. Chen spun Boss Li in panic as both comments hit him at once. Chen then stood confidently, tapping his chin with a knowing smile. He declared that this was a classic case of deficiency. Hearing that, Boss Li exploded in anger, pointing his finger while shouting that Chen was the deficient one, and that his whole family was deficient. He ordered him to get lost. Chen stayed calm. He reached out and took a lollipop from a rack, speaking evenly as he advised Boss Li to take care of his health. He said that anger harmed the body, especially with Boss Li's condition, and warned that if he didn't pay attention, it could shorten his life. As Chen walked past, he tossed a coin and placed the lollipop into his mouth. Behind him, Boss Li stumbled in shock. The coin Chen had tossed earlier fell to the floor with a sharp clink against the tiles. A red system window suddenly appeared, saying that Boss Li's strong negative emotions had been detected, anger rising sharply. Later that night, a black cat walked past the brightly lit storefront of the convenience store. As it passed, bringing bad luck with it, Chen approached. He stood outside the convenience store under the cold night sky. A heavy thought echoed inside his mind. In his past life, he had swallowed his anger and let people walk all over him. But now, in this life, he vowed to take everything back with interest. He lowered himself slightly, remembering what the system had said. A spark lit in his eyes. He recalled that the system mentioned he could expand the space, and Li Dafu's contributed emotions were perfect for it. A system window appeared before him, displaying that 20 negative emotions had been consumed. Another window followed, announcing that the storage space expansion was complete. Chen then raised his hand, and a swirling black void opened in his palm with a sharp whoosh. Purple and red energy spiraled around his arm as he controlled the strange vortex. A confident smile slowly formed on his face. Then morning arrived peacefully. Birds perched among the green leaves, chirping lightly as they greeted the new day. Li Dafu strolled toward his shop happily, singing a song. Suddenly he froze in shock. He looked toward the entrance of the store, his eyes widening as he saw something unexpected. He rushed inside and trembled as he looked around. The shelves that were once full now stood completely empty. Every row, every section bare. Boss Li's face darkened in horror as he screamed, "Where are my goods?" Boss Li grabbed his head in frustration. He shouted loudly, demanding to know who had done this and who was responsible for the mess. On the other hand, a computer screen displayed a security feed of him screaming inside the store. Below the footage, a system notification appeared, showing that his negative emotions had increased by 66. Right in front of the screen, Chen sat calmly in a chair, crossing his legs as he lifted a soda can to his lips. He took a slow drink, watching the scene with a relaxed expression, completely unfazed by the chaos he had caused. Li Dafu lost control and shouted in anger. He yelled, asking who did it and who stole all his stock. He screamed for the person to get out immediately. In the next moment, Li Dafu slipped. His body lost balance, and he fell hard onto the ground. He screamed loudly as he crashed down. Li Dafu sat on the floor, holding his face in pain and despair. Behind him, people gathered and whispered among themselves. Someone said all the goods were gone in just one night. Another person wondered if Li Dafu had staged this himself to raise prices. Someone else worried that the supermarket was empty and asked what they would do next. Nearby, two women talked in low voices. One said she had heard that someone saw a dark shadow floating around last night. The other woman looked shocked and asked if that was really true. Li Dafu's face twisted in shock. He shouted in disbelief, saying there was no way the place was haunted. At the same time, system panels appeared silently. Strong negative emotion was detected. From within the crowd, Chen watched calmly. He observed Li Dafu and thought that his emotional output was still quite stable. Chen casually took out a chip and ate it while standing there. His expression remained relaxed. Inside his mind, Chen decided to stir things up a little more. He planned to add fuel to the fire and give Li Dafu a small thrill. Chen walked forward while holding a bag of chips. He smiled slightly and said that it smelled really good. Li Dafu, who was still kneeling on the ground, suddenly noticed him. His eyes locked onto the bag in Chen's hand, and he stared at it without blinking. He remembered that this packaging was his stock. He also remembered that yesterday, Chen was the one who asked if his chips were made of gold, or if they could prevent heat stroke to be sold at such a high price. He also warned that hoarding so many treasures might make it hard to sleep at night, and that he should watch out for thieves. Li Dafu suddenly lunged forward and grabbed Chen by the collar. His face twisted with anger as he shouted, demanding to know where Chen got those chips. He accused Chen of stealing his goods, and still acting arrogant. Chen did not panic. He calmly looked at Li Dafu and told him that getting physical was no fun. He asked Li Dafu if he had any evidence. Chen continued in a steady tone. He said that making accusations without proof meant Li Dafu would have to take responsibility. Then Chen glanced around the supermarket and spoke again. He said the place was really clean, not even a single chip left behind. With a faint smile, he suggested giving Li Dafu the remaining half bag of chips. Li Dafu shouted angrily at Chen. He accused him of cursing him yesterday. He said that now all the goods were gone, yet Chen was still eating chips there. He yelled that if Chen did not steal them, then who did? In his heart, Li Dafu thought that even if Chen was not the thief, he could still squeeze something out of him to cover his losses. At that moment, a red system panel appeared. Strong negative emotion was detected. Li Dafu's anger surged sharply. Chen remained calm. He asked everyone to judge for themselves. He said that Boss Li lost his own stock and now wanted to blame him for it. People in the crowd began to talk. Someone said that other places sold these chips too. Another person pointed out that Li Dafu complained yesterday that the chips were expensive, and today the supermarket was completely empty. It felt too coincidental. Li Dafu stared at Chen in disbelief. Inside his mind, he wondered how this weak-looking kid had suddenly become so tough. Chen looked straight at Li Dafu and spoke calmly. He said that if Boss Li did not believe him, he could search his house. Chen promised that if any items from the supermarket were found there, he would pay 10 times the value. But if nothing was found, then the backup generator at Boss Li's back door would belong to him. Li Dafu sneered and agreed loudly. He told Chen to let them search and said they would see how long Chen could keep pretending. The two stared at each other closely, neither backing down. Li Dafu then shouted to the crowd. He said it would be better if they found the stolen goods. If not, he mocked Chen and said that wanting the generator was nothing but a dream. The crowd stood behind them, watching the confrontation in tense silence as the situation reached a breaking point. After that, the group entered Chen Xiao's house, and everyone froze in place. Someone exclaimed in shock that Chen Xiao's house was extremely luxurious. Another person muttered that he really had been hiding his true strength. In their minds, they all wondered when this kid had become so rich. Lai Dafu looked up and raised his hands toward the crystal chandelier on the ceiling. His eyes widened in disbelief. He moved around the room and stopped in front of the wardrobe. When he saw the expensive clothes hanging neatly inside, his mouth fell open. Then the refrigerator door was opened. Inside were neatly arranged drinks, jars of food, cakes, and fresh meat. Everything looked carefully stored and untouched. Next to it, a safe was revealed. When it was opened, stacks of gold bars were seen inside, shining brightly. Lai Dafu leaned closer and peeked inside, his face turning pale. Cold sweat rolled down his face as shock completely took over. Chen Xiao stood calmly with his arms crossed and looked at Boss Li. With a faint smile, he asked if Boss Li had searched enough, and whether he wanted to pry open the floorboards as well. Boss Li's face stiffened. Cold sweat poured down as panic took over. He stammered that there was no need, and said he would go ask other places instead. As he spoke, he turned around and hurried toward the exit, looking completely flustered. Just as Boss Li tried to escape, Chen Xiao suddenly spoke up and told him not to go yet. He reminded Boss Li about the generator they had agreed on. Chen Xiao reached out and grabbed Boss Li by the collar, stopping him in his tracks. Boss Li froze on the spot, his face pale, and his body stiff, unable to move. Everyone present had clearly heard the agreement. Chen Xiao looked at Boss Li and calmly asked if he was really planning to go back on his word. Boss Li immediately pretended to be confused. He laughed awkwardly and said he had no idea what generator Chen Xiao was talking about. He told Chen Xiao to calm down and claimed there was no need to make things so ugly. Chen Xiao did not smile. He coldly reminded Boss Li that when Boss Li framed him before, he never once talked about stepping back or calming down. The people around them watched in silence. Someone muttered that they could not understand how a person like this could refuse to keep his word. Another voice followed, saying that Boss Li had no integrity at all, and that it was only right for someone like him to be taken advantage of. Boss Li stood there stiffly, his face twisted, completely exposed in front of everyone. Boss Li finally lost his temper. He shouted at Chen Xiao, saying that he had already shown him respect, but Chen Xiao still refused to back down. Before Boss Li could react, Chen Xiao moved. He grabbed Boss Li's hand and twisted it hard. A sharp cracking sound rang out as pain shot through Boss Li's arm. Boss Li screamed loudly, clutching his hand in agony. His face twisted in pain as his body bent forward, unable to resist. He shouted, saying he would move the generator right away. Chen Xiao looked at him coldly and told him to hurry. He warned that once the temperature rose later, it would be impossible to go outside. He calmly reminded Boss Li that power would be rationed in a few days, and without a generator, Li Dafu would have no way to cope. A system notification appeared at once. Strong negative emotions were detected. Humiliation surged, pain increased sharply, and fear spiked even higher. Chen Xiao turned away calmly, standing straight as if nothing had happened. The room fell silent, and no one dared to speak. Just then, a phone suddenly rang on the table. The caller name on the screen was Lu Wanqing. As soon as the call connected, Lu Wanqing spoke anxiously. She told Chen Xiao that for the past 2 days, a few people had been following her. From their behavior, they looked like debt collectors. Chen Xiao frowned slightly as he listened. Lu Wanqing sounded upset and confused. She asked him if he had not said that she was only signing papers. She did not understand why those people were now stalking her. Chen Xiao stood quietly beside the table, looking down at the phone screen. His expression turned serious as he listened to her words, already sensing that trouble was approaching. Lu Wanqing raised her voice angrily. She demanded that Chen Xiao tell her the truth. She asked why the people from the Dahai gang were looking for her, and whether he had lied to her. Chen Xiao looked at his phone and replied softly. He asked why she never trusted him. He said he had already paid so much for her sake. He continued walking slowly while speaking. He told her that he had poured his heart out to her and would never lie. Hearing her accuse him made him feel very sad. As the call continued, Chen Xiao's expression turned cold. In his mind, he thought that the group from the Dahai gang was even more impatient than he had expected. Chen Xiao spoke into the phone while standing in front of the refrigerator. He calmly asked whether the people from the Dahai gang knew where Lu Wanqing lived yet and what they had said to her. Lu Wanqing answered quickly. She said they did not know her address. She explained that she took small roads and managed to shake them off. Her tone turned sharp. She demanded to know what was really going on and warned Chen Xiao not to play tricks on her. Chen Xiao leaned against the wall, listening quietly. After a short pause, he spoke again in a steady voice. He told her not to overthink it, and suggested that she might have mistaken someone else for them. He then sat quietly at the table. In front of him was a plate of food, with his phone lying on the surface. On the phone screen, Lu Wanqing suddenly froze. Her eyes widened as she noticed the food on the table. She asked Chen how he could still have things like that. Chen Xiao calmly lifted a can of soda and took a sip. He replied casually that it was not just those things. He said he still had plenty in stock. On the phone screen, Lu Wanqing looked at him in surprise and asked if he really had a lot. As she lay on the sofa holding her phone, her thoughts raced. The heatwave had lasted for many days. Supplies were now only available to the rich. She could not understand where he got so much food from. A thought crossed her mind. Maybe he had really become rich. Chen Xiao spoke casually while drinking. He said that food like this tasted best when the weather was hot. He picked up his fork and took a piece of salmon. He ate it calmly, without any hurry. On the other side of the call, Lu Wanqing stared at the screen in shock. Her eyes widened as she recognized the food. She could hardly believe it was salmon. Her heart beat faster. She hugged her phone tightly and shouted in her mind that she really wanted to eat it too. Chen spoke softly through the phone. He asked Lu Wanqing if she had enough food over there. Lu Wanqing continued in a low voice. She said she was really scared living alone. She felt like those people were still nearby and could show up at any time. So she asked Chen if she could stay at his place for a few days. She lay on the sofa, holding her phone close. Her voice softened as she added that she could keep him company. Chen Xiao picked up another piece of salmon. Inside his mind, he mocked quietly, thinking that Lu Wanqing had fallen for it too easily. He spoke into the phone in a calm tone. He said the weather would only get hotter later, and it would be inconvenient for her to go outside. He then reminded her of what she used to say before. He said she always told him that a girl should not casually give her address to others, acting mysterious and never letting him visit. After that, Chen Xiao spoke again. He told her to send him the address, and he would pick her up later tonight when it cooled down. On the other side, Lu Wanqing smiled. She said that was all in the past. The situation was special now, and since he was her boyfriend, he should protect her. She added that if he did not protect her, then who would? As she spoke, she sent him her address and leaned back on the sofa, holding her phone with a relaxed expression. Chen Xiao looked at his phone and spoke calmly. He told her to wait obediently at home and make sure not to run around. On the other side, Lu Wanqing lay on the sofa with her legs raised, holding her phone. In her heart she thought that a simp was still a simp, easily moved by a little sweetness. Chen Xiao lowered his gaze. Inside his mind, dark thoughts surfaced. He thought about how she used to act proud and distant, never even letting him enter her community. Now she had willingly sent her apartment number, just for a bite of food. Just as he was thinking, someone suddenly knocked at his door. Outside, a woman stood with a child beside her. She raised her hand and called out, asking Chen Xiao to open the door. Chen Xiao walked toward the entrance and stopped in front of it. He opened the door slightly and looked outside. With a calm smile, he asked Auntie Wang if something was wrong. Auntie Wang smiled as she spoke. She said Chen Xiao's place felt cool. Her air conditioner was broken, and the child could not endure the heat. She said they were all neighbors and should help each other, asking to come inside and stay for a while. Chen Xiao looked at her quietly. He then spoke coldly. He reminded her of the past. He said that when he was little, he and his mother picked up plastic bottles downstairs. Back then, Auntie Wang pointed at them, called them poor beggars, and even told security to chase them away. He asked her if she remembered him now. Auntie Wang's face changed. She suddenly shouted angrily and lashed out. She pointed at Chen Xiao and shouted that it was all from many years ago, her voice sharp and impatient. She accused Chen Xiao of holding a grudge and yelled that he had no human touch at all. Chen Xiao responded calmly, almost casually. He said that was fine. He said he might not have any human touch, but he did have air conditioning. Auntie Wang turned away in rage. Her anger burst out completely. She suddenly cursed him loudly. She shouted that he was heartless, and said he deserved it when his parents died early. As she slammed her hand against the door, a system notification appeared. Strong negative emotion detected. Anger increased sharply. After that, Chen turned away from the door and walked back into the room. On the table, his phone lay beside a SIM card. Chen Xiao picked it up and inserted the new SIM into the phone, holding it in one hand. He called the Dahai gang leader. Chen Xiao held the phone to his ear and spoke in a low voice. He said that he knew Liu Wanqing's address. He told the Dahai gang that he had already sent it over and that she lived alone, making her very easy to find. After the call ended, Chen Xiao stood quietly on the balcony. Sunlight fell across the room behind him. He looked down and softly spoke her name, Liu Wanqing, thinking that the show had begun. Liu Wanqing stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. A satisfied smile appeared on her face. She thought that soon she would be able to move into Chen Xiao's air-conditioned room. In her mind, she imagined Chen kneeling in front of her, and believed that only this kind of easy and carefree life was worthy of her. She sat comfortably, enjoying the cool air, looking relaxed and confident. Later, she lay on the bed and lit a cigarette, holding it lightly between her fingers. Her expression was calm, as if everything was already under her control. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the door. Liu Wanqing turned her head in surprise and got up. She walked to the door and opened it slightly. With a smile, she spoke casually, asking why he had arrived so early. Inside her heart, she mocked silently, thinking that he was truly eager and easy to manipulate. But Liu Wanqing's eyes widened in shock. Fear spread across her face as she realized something was wrong. 3 men stood in front of her. The man in the middle was Zhang Yang. He stepped forward, blocking her path. She looked at them in panic and asked how they knew where she lived. Zhang slapped her aside and smiled coldly. He told her that the money she owed to the Dahai gang had to be paid back today. Hearing that, Liu Wanqing trembled. She tried to argue and said that the money was not hers. She shouted that Chen Xiao had borrowed it and tricked her into signing. She told them to go find him instead. Zhang then leaned closer, holding the contract in his hand. He said the agreement was clear. Whoever signed it had to pay. He told her to stop talking nonsense. Hearing that, Liu Wanqing lost her balance and fell to the floor. Fear and regret filled her face. Zhang straightened up and gave an order. He told his men to search the place and take everything valuable. The 2 men behind him moved forward, their eyes cold, as they began to carry out the order. One of the men lifted a wooden plank and smashed the furniture while searching the room. Drawers were pulled open, and things were thrown everywhere. Liu Wanqing shouted in panic. She told them to stop rummaging and said she was calling Chen Xiao. She claimed he would come right away and told them to go look for him instead. The men ignored her. They opened her bags and poured everything out. Jewelry scattered across the table, but Zhang only glanced at it with disappointment. He said these things were just scraps and not even enough to cover the interest. Liu Wanqing stood frozen, her face pale with fear. She realized there was nothing valuable enough to satisfy them. The man sat down lazily on the sofa and picked up one of the bags. He said they had come all this way in the hot weather and could not leave empty-handed. He lifted the bag and looked at it coldly, repeating that these scraps were still not enough. Liu Wanqing's legs weakened. She backed away and shouted desperately, telling them not to come closer. She cried that the money was with Chen Xiao and begged them to go find him instead. Zhang closed in on her. Her voice trembled as fear completely took over. Zhang's eyes narrowed as he looked down at Liu Wanqing. A cold smile slowly formed on his face. Liu Wanqing clenched her fists and spoke in a hurry. She said that Chen Xiao had many supplies and would be coming to pick her up soon. She told them to wait for him and ask him for the money instead. She quickly took out her phone and tried to call Chen Xiao. The call did not go through. A cold voice from the phone said that the number she had dialed was currently unavailable. Liu Wanqing froze. She stared at the screen in disbelief and tried again. The same message played once more. Her hands began to shake. Sweat ran down her face as fear filled her eyes. She looked up and said weakly that no one was answering. The room grew silent. Zhang, standing in front of her, did not move. Their shadows slowly closed in as her last hope faded away. Liu Wanqing stared in disbelief. Her eyes trembled as she wondered how this could be happening. She hurriedly tried to calm everyone. She said Chen Xiao must be busy, and did not hear the phone ring. She forced a nervous smile and said she would call him again right away. But before she could react, Zhang suddenly lashed out. He threw her phone and cursed her harshly, calling her stupid. He said Chen Xiao had already sold her out. He shouted that Chen Xiao never planned to repay the money from the start, and had only tricked her into signing. Hearing this, Liu Wanqing froze. Her face turned pale as she muttered in shock, unable to understand what she was hearing. Zhang grabbed her hair roughly and pulled her toward him. She screamed and told him to let go. Tears filled her eyes as she struggled. She shouted that they should go find Chen Xiao instead. She cried that only Chen Xiao had the things they wanted, and begged him to release her. A sharp scream filled the room, as Lu Wanqing was dragged down to the floor. She cried out in pain and fear while the men stood around her. The door burst closed with a loud crash, as Zhang forced Lu Wanqing inside. At the same moment, her phone slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. The screen shattered as it hit the floor. Broken sounds echoed while her cries continued. Her screams filled the air. She tried to speak, but only broken words came out. Fear overwhelmed her, as her screams grew louder. Elsewhere, Chen Xiao sat calmly in a quiet room. He leaned back in his chair, holding a glass of red wine. His phone lay on the table nearby, glowing softly. His expression remained relaxed and cold, as if everything was going exactly as planned. He lifted the glass slightly and looked ahead with a faint smile. In his mind, he addressed her calmly. He wished Lu Wanqing a good taste of the apocalypse passion. Some time later, Lu Wanqing's quiet apartment building stood under the city lights. One window was lit, while the rest remained dark. Inside the room, Zhang sat up while dressing, his back facing forward. Not far away, Lu Wanqing curled up on the bed. She hugged her knees tightly, her face buried near her hands. Tears fell as she sobbed again and again. Zhang then grabbed a cup from the table. The cup hit the surface with a hard sound. Zhang stepped closer and grabbed Lu Wanqing by the chin, forcing her to look up. He asked what good things were at Chen Xiao's place and told her to say it again. With tears streaming down her face and fear in her eyes, Lu Wanqing answered in a broken voice. She said there was air conditioning, cold drinks, and lots of food. She weakly whispered that his home had everything. Hearing that, Zhang's eyes narrowed as he looked down at her. Lu Wanqing told him to go find Chen Xiao, saying that he was the person they should be looking for. Tears streamed down her face as she cried and said that she really had nothing left. After getting all the information, Zhang threw Lu Wanqing onto the bed, her body curling up from the impact. He stood upright, thinking that if there was air conditioning and supplies, then he had caught a big fish this time. He smiled and turned to his men, telling them it was time to go. They left, slamming Lu Wanqing's door shut and leaving broken glass scattered on the floor. Lu Wanqing sat alone on the bed, covering her mouth as tears fell. She said that Chen Xiao had tricked her. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she shouted that he would die a horrible death. The street was quiet at night, with tall apartment buildings on both sides. Dim lights glowed from the windows as several figures walked down the empty road. A pair of polished shoes stepped forward, their footsteps echoing sharply against the ground. Ahead, a group moved through the darkness. One man led the way and spoke confidently. It was none other than Zhang Yang, and the one showing them the way was the woman who had tried to enter Chen's house but was denied. She pointed ahead and said this was the place. Chen Xiao lived right here. She claimed that Chen Xiao's home had the air conditioning running all day and night, with plenty of food and drinks. Then her tone turned bitter as she complained that Chen Xiao was extremely stingy and would not even share a sip of water. Hearing that, Zhang sneered and told the woman leading them that she had done well. He promised that once they got the supplies, she would receive plenty of benefits. Hearing that, she leaned forward with a flattering smile and thanked Brother Zhang, praising him as generous and saying it was no wonder he could become a big boss. In her mind, she imagined that when she went to Chen's house with Boss Zhang, Chen would immediately drop to his knees and beg desperately. Chen would cry that he was wrong and plead for his life. And to save himself, Chen would say that from now on his home would belong to them and he would live wherever they wanted. That woman smiled coldly and muttered that this time she would see just how arrogant Chen Xiao could still be. Boss Zhang's whole group arrived at Chen's house. They stopped right in front of it as Zhang looked up toward Chen's apartment. He touched his chin, sweat on his face, and narrowed his eyes. He sensed something strange and said that Chen had something going on. So he stayed behind and had two men go ahead to check, holding their weapons. One man stepped forward eagerly and shouted that he would kick the door down for Brother Zhang. He rushed ahead and lifted his foot to strike. At that moment, a blue electric light suddenly flashed beneath his leg. Sparks crackled as his foot froze in midair. The man screamed in pain as electricity wrapped around his body. His weapon slipped from his hand and fell to the ground. Another man stood nearby holding a blade, watching in shock as the screaming continued. That man was electrocuted and fell to the ground. The other men looked down at the fallen figure and cursed angrily. They mocked him, asking why he suddenly cramped up. Blue electricity continued to crawl over the fallen man's body as he lay spread out on the ground. His fingers twitched as he tried to move. Just as those two men grabbed the clothes of the man lying on the ground, the electric current surged again. Both of the guys were hit by the powerful electricity. They screamed loudly, begging for help as the lightning wrapped tighter around their bodies. Seeing that, the others froze in place. Their faces stiffened as they stared ahead, unable to understand what was happening. Just then, above them, a small loudspeaker slid out silently from the rooftop. The group looked up together. Their expressions turned blank, eyes wide with shock. No one spoke as confusion filled their faces. The loudspeaker suddenly activated, and Chen's cheerful voice echoed through the night, repeating words of blessing about good luck, joy, love, and prosperity spreading in all directions. The message continued to play again and again, its tone calm and festive, completely out of place in the tense night. At the same time, blue electric light burst out across the ground. Lightning surged violently and wrapped around those three men. Their bodies were thrown into the air as the current struck them hard. Painful screams filled the air. One man cried out in agony as electricity coursed through his body. The sound of electricity crackling drowned out everything else. Zhang cursed loudly in fear and anger as he staggered back, barely keeping his balance. Others rushed forward with weapons in their hands, but their steps faltered when they saw the lightning spreading across the ground. Blue electric arcs crawled along the surface like living snakes, blocking their path. A system notification popped up right in front of Chen, saying it detected intense negative emotion. Shock increased by 45, then 36, and then 22. Far away from the chaos, inside his quiet room, Chen leaned back comfortably in a chair. His legs rested casually, and he held a remote control in one hand. On the screen in front of him, the scene outside played clearly, showing the attackers being struck by electricity. He watched calmly, his expression relaxed. With an amused tone, he spoke softly. He commented that their luck was actually not bad. He pointed out that one of them had stepped directly onto the protective electric grid with a single foot. Zhang stepped forward angrily, gripping his weapon tightly. His face twisted with rage as he shouted at Chen Shao, telling him to stop playing tricks. He said that paying back debts was a matter of principle. He demanded that Chen Shao return the money, so everything could be settled. The woman beside him immediately echoed the accusation. She pointed at Chen Shao and shouted that he clearly had money to renovate his place. With a sneer, she questioned how Chen Shou's parents had raised him. The group glared upward, their anger burning hotter by the second. Inside the apartment, Chen Shao sat calmly in a chair. His posture was relaxed, one leg crossed over the other. He held a green popsicle loosely in his hand, his expression composed and cold. The noise outside did not disturb him at all. He spoke in a steady voice. He addressed Brother Zhang directly, and stated that the market price of his apartment was 4 million. He calmly pointed out that this amount was more than enough to cover the 3.5 million debt. Chen Shao's lips curved slightly as he continued. He said that as for Liu Wanqing's debt, they should go find her themselves. He asked what that matter had to do with him. Hearing that, outside, Zhang stood in the street and stared up at the building. His expression stiffened as the words sank in. His face tightened, sweat ran down his forehead, and his eyes widened with anger and disbelief. Inside his mind, his thoughts churned. He realized that in the current situation, supplies were everything. Money no longer mattered the way it used to. His jaw clenched as frustration and fury mixed together, leaving him grinding his teeth in silence. Chen Shao calmly held the popsicle to his lips, his expression relaxed. He spoke in an even tone, addressing Brother Zhang. He said that a wise man knows how to submit to circumstances. Since he was in a good mood, he suggested that they part on good terms. His gaze remained cold as he continued. He warned that if they kept looking for trouble, he would no longer be so polite. Saying that, Chen Shao extended his hand and pressed the red button on the table without hesitation. Outside, blue electric light exploded across the ground. Lightning surged violently, spreading in all directions. A sharp scream rang out as those people were struck by the current. Electric arcs twisted and snapped through the air. One of the men cried out desperately, shouting that he could not hold on anymore. His body convulsed as the electricity wrapped around him, bones visible through the glowing blue light. Red system panels appeared in the air, flashing warnings, saying that intense negative emotions had been detected. Pain rising sharply, followed by overwhelming despair. Brother Zhang and the remaining men stood frozen, watching their man's condition. Finally, Zhang turned and shouted furiously while retreating. He cursed Chen Shao, yelling that the Dahai gang would never let him off. As they fled into the night, another system panel appeared silently, recording the surge of intense anger. Above it all, Chen Shao remained inside, calm and unmoved, watching as the chaos outside faded away. Seeing all this, the woman's face twisted in fear. Her eyes trembled as dark shadows covered them, and her expression showed deep shock and hatred. Outside the tall apartment building, she was the only one left standing, looking up at the building as she could feel Chen's anger pouring down like flames from the sky. The next day, a warning panel appeared, showing that the temperature had reached 52 this Fus. The sunlight was blinding, washing the buildings in white and yellow light. Cars were parked along the road, but the heat made the entire place feel lifeless and suffocating. Inside the apartment, Chen Xiao lay casually on the sofa. He held a bowl of food and ate calmly, saying that it felt refreshing. On the television, a news broadcast played. The reporter warned that recently, many people had died from heat stroke. Citizens were advised to avoid going outside as much as possible. A temperature chart on the screen showed the heat continuing to rise, marked again at 52 tols. While Chen was watching the news, his phone suddenly vibrated on the table beside him. Chen Xiao turned his head slightly and looked toward the phone. His phone screen was filled with messages from the homeowners group. One message after another appeared, all calling his name. The woman from before accused him of being inhuman, saying he had food, water, and air conditioning, while elderly people and children were dying from the heat. Another message followed, calling him selfish and unfit to be a neighbor. More people joined in. Someone said that in extraordinary times, resources must be shared, or else he was no different from a murderer. Another message said they were about to die from the heat and demanded to know if he felt any shame at all. Someone else directly told Chen Xiao to come out and give everyone an explanation. Chen Xiao calmly lifted a glass of water and took a sip. His expression did not change. With his other hand, he casually slid his finger across the phone screen, scrolling through the messages without haste. As the messages continued to pile up, system panels appeared one after another. One panel showed that intense jealousy had been detected. Another panel followed immediately, reporting even stronger anger. Then suddenly, a larger red system window appeared, announcing that the total negative emotion value had exceeded 1,000 and that rewards were being calculated. Chen Xiao stood in front of the open refrigerator, looking at the neatly stored food inside. The shelves were filled with fruits, drinks, and packaged items. Everything was well organized and clearly abundant. He raised his phone and took a photo of the refrigerator, capturing everything inside. Then he sent that photo of the full refrigerator to the homeowners group chat. A message was sent along with it, stating that his stockpile was indeed quite large, and that anyone who wanted some could sign up. Almost immediately, replies flooded in. People rushed to respond, asking him to share a little. Someone begged him to send food to an elderly aunt, whose legs were not in good condition. Another demanded water first. More people quickly typed that they wanted to sign up. Chen Xiao looked down at his phone and typed another message. He clearly stated that he was not running a charity. If anyone wanted supplies, they had to exchange something of equal value. Otherwise, there would be no deal. He added that he refused freeloaders. The moment the message was sent, the tone of the group changed. Angry replies appeared. One person shouted that Chen Xiao was selfish and told him to hurry up and share the supplies if he wanted to be considered a good neighbor. Another accused him of revealing his true nature, claiming that refusing to save the dying would bring him karma sooner or later. Someone else threatened him, saying that if they starved to death he would not have it easy either. After sending that message, Chen Xiao leaned back on the sofa, his head tilted slightly upward. His phone slipped from his loose hand and rested near his fingers. An apple lay beside him on the table, untouched. But suddenly, his eyes opened. A sharp light flashed across his red pupils as he focused. His expression changed from calm to alert. A glowing system panel appeared in the air before him. The panel announced that the negative emotion value had reached 3,000. Another line followed, stating that a skill upgrade had been obtained. Spatial cut, beginner. A second panel appeared right after. It explained the effect of the skill. A microscopic rift could be created in the air, cutting anything it touched. The range was limited to within 3 meters. Chen Xiao sat up slightly and looked at the blue transparent panel floating in front of him. He quietly repeated the skill's name, testing the words in his mind. He then looked at the table. The apple sat still under the light. Chen Xiao raised his hand. His fingers spread as if gripping something invisible. A thin glowing line appeared in the air, sharp and silent. In the next moment, the apple was cleanly split in half. The cut was smooth, as if it had been sliced by an unseen blade. The two halves separated and fell apart neatly. Seeing that, Chen Xiao stood up, his movements light and controlled. His red eyes shone faintly as he looked at the result. A small smile formed on his face. To him, this was no longer just survival. Things had finally become interesting. At the same time, outside on the street, streetlights cast a warm yellow light onto the road. Parked cars lined both sides, while one red off-road vehicle moved slowly down the center of the street. A pair of red high heels stepped onto the ground. It was Lin Wancheng. She stepped forward. She wore a black dress that hugged her figure, with a sheer black shawl hanging loosely from her arms. Her expression was calm and cold as she looked ahead. Behind her, the red off-road vehicle door opened. Two men in black suits and sunglasses stood on either side of the open door, guarding it silently. Inside the vehicle, Liu Yang leaned back in his seat. He held a cigar between his fingers, smoke curling into the air. His eyes were sharp and calculating as he watched from the shadows. He stepped out as Zhang appeared there. Liu Yang spoke, asking little Zhang if the Chen Sao they mentioned lived here. He asked while pointing at the building ahead. Zhang reported calmly to Liu Yang that Chen Sao lived in the innermost building. Liu Yang listened without changing his expression. Smoke drifted from his mouth as his eyes narrowed slightly. He suddenly grabbed Lin Wanqing's back, surprising her. She turned in shock and looked at him. Liu Yang turned toward her with a grin. Holding the cigar between his fingers, he spoke casually. He said that Chen Xiao used to be her man. He added that he was now leading a team to raid Chen Xiao's home and asked whether she would feel heartache about it. Lin Wanqing leaned closer to him. Her hand pressed against his chest as she looked up at his face. She spoke softly, calling him Brother Liu, and said that at this moment her heart only held him. Hearing that, Liu Yang laughed. His arm wrapped around her waist as he pulled her closer. Seeing that, Lin Wanqing's expression changed uncomfortably. She looked aside with a cold smile and spoke without hesitation. She said that Chen Xiao was nothing more than a useless piece of trash. Saying that, her eyes hardened. She tilted her head slightly and looked down, her voice turning sharp. She called out Chen Xiao's name and declared coldly that tonight would be his death date. While all this was happening, Liu Yang suddenly noticed some figures stepping out from the building entrance, their silhouettes stretching across the ground. Two residents rushed forward. It was Li Dafu and another man. Li Dafu pointed toward the building and shouted that they were homeowners in the complex. He asked if the group had come for Chen Xiao and said they were willing to help teach him a lesson. The other man quickly added that if Chen Xiao tried to escape, they would block his route, because they knew the area well. Liu Yang listened to them. He agreed and said that if they helped catch Chen Xiao, he would share some of the things in Chen Xiao's room with them. Hearing that, the two residents became excited. Li Dafu bowed slightly and thanked him, saying they knew a shortcut and would lead the way. Elsewhere near the building, chaos was visible. Liu Yang's men were emptying the whole neighborhood. Back on the street, Liu Yang, along with Li Dafu, began to move together. Liu Yang walked ahead with Lin Wanqing beside him, and several men followed from behind. The group reached the entrance of Li Dafu's shop, which was being robbed. Seeing that, Li Dafu rushed forward in panic, raising his hands and shouting that this was his home and that they were on the same side. His voice trembled as he tried to stop them. Liu Yang's men who were robbing the shop answered coldly, saying that it was no longer his home. They declared that the entire building now belonged to Boss Liu. On the other hand, Chen's aunt and nearby residents finally realized the danger. She screamed in fear and anger, saying they could not do this and that they had not provoked anyone. A tall man standing beside her kicked her to the ground. Chaos erupted, and Li Dafu and all the nearby residents were knocked down, their bodies scattered across the street. Chen's aunt sprawled on the ground, staring in despair as she thought about her greed. She admitted that she had been wrong, that everything was gone now, even her chance to survive. Another man shouted in regret, calling himself blind for trusting a bunch of beasts. Liu Yang's group moved forward, leaving those residents crying behind. Liu Yang and his men finally stopped right in front of Chen's building, standing confidently with weapons in their hands, metal bats glinting under the lights. Right at the front was Liu Yang, with Lin Wanqing beside him. Liu Yang's face was calm and ruthless, more men appearing from behind, weapons resting on their shoulders. The pressure was overwhelming as they closed in. At the building entrance, a figure finally appeared. It was Chen Xiao, stepping out into the light. Without hesitation, he lifted his arm and threw a sofa straight out of the doorway. The heavy furniture flew through the air and slammed onto the ground with a loud crash, breaking the silence and marking the moment Chen Xiao revealed himself. Chen sat calmly at the table, holding a piece of meat on a fork. He brought it to his mouth and took a slow bite, chewing without any hurry. His posture was relaxed, as if nothing around him mattered. He looked down from his seat and spoke casually, asking if everyone was looking for him. His tone was calm and almost amused as he continued holding the fork in his hand. Liu Yang glared fiercely. He leaned forward and threatened Chen, saying that death was close. He demanded the supplies and promised to leave the body intact if the order was followed. Lin Wanqing stood close beside him, her face tense and her eyes fixed on Chen. Chen lowered his head slightly and wiped his mouth with a napkin. His movements were slow and deliberate. He then lifted his gaze, his expression cold, and remarked that disturbing someone while eating was rude. Hearing that, the air suddenly became heavy. Liu Yang grew furious upon hearing Chen's words. He pointed at Chen and shouted angrily, ordering his men to cripple him. Several figures rushed forward at once. Weapons were raised. Clubs, blades, and a spiked flail swung through the air as they charged. Chen moved and dodged the first man's punch. The second attacker rushed in from the front, but in the next instant, Chen stepped forward and slammed him into the ground. The pavement cracked under the force. Another man leapt in from above, swinging his spiked flail down, but Chen turned sharply. With a powerful kick, he sent the attacker flying. The man's body spun through the air before crashing hard onto the ground. That attacker was struck mid-charge and thrown backward, his body skidding across the street. Suddenly, an axe came toward him, cutting through the air with a sharp, cold gleam, slicing forward at terrifying speed. It was a man with short hair who lunged aggressively at Chen with the axe. His face twisted with rage as he brought it down. Seeing this, Chen thought that they were forcing him to use a special technique. Suddenly, a cylindrical object fell right in front of him. The object tumbled across the ground, rolling to a stop near Li Yang's group. Li Yang and his companions froze for a split second. Their eyes widened as they noticed the object. Before anyone could react, a blinding flash erupted. A violent explosion burst outward, engulfing the area in smoke and light. The shockwave expanded rapidly, swallowing the street as debris and dust filled the air. When the smoke rose, everything was obscured. The battlefield vanished behind thick clouds. Liu Yang raised his arm to cover his mouth and nose as he coughed hard. His eyes narrowed as he shouted loudly that it was tear gas. He warned the others that Chen had a helper and ordered everyone to retreat first. Inside the smoke, Chen moved quickly. He leaped forward and jumped out of the smoke. Just then, a voice came from Chen's side. Chen turned his head toward a shadowed figure leaning against the railing. The figure spoke calmly, saying that the trouble caused was not small, but added that Chen's skills were indeed not bad. Chen faced the speaker directly. His expression was cold as he asked why the other person was here. From the darkness, Mukong stepped forward. With a faint smile, he asked if Chen still wanted guns, saying that he had good goods available. After Liu Yang and his men left, Chen took out some water for Mukong. Mukong looked at the box of bottled water and got very excited. He said that drinking ice water at a time like this meant Chen was living a very comfortable life. Chen calmly placed the box on the table and handed one bottle to Mukong, saying they should talk. He asked why Mukong had come here when this area was not his territory. Mukong casually reached out and grabbed the bottle of water. He said that Liu Yang's men had been stealing his business recently. Because of that, he had been watching Liu Yang for days. When he saw him come this way, he followed to take a look. He did not expect that Liu Yang was actually coming for Chen. While speaking, Mukong glanced at the stack of bottled water beside Chen. He pointed out that supplies had been scarce for a long time, yet Chen had a large stockpile here. He said that this kind of stock could not be gathered without special channels. Chen's eyes narrowed as he listened to Mukong. His expression turned cold, and he asked Mukong what he was trying to say. Mukong smiled and spoke calmly. He said that he was not trying to pry into Chen's supplies. He explained that Liu Yang had recently stockpiled a large amount of purified water, and he wanted to cooperate to get that water. He leaned closer to Chen and said that he was familiar with the layout of Liu Yang's underground business. He said that Chen only needed to find a way to get the water. Once it was taken, they could store it here first, and Mukong would handle selling it later. Hearing that, Chen also thought that as the temperature kept rising, water resources had truly become valuable currency. After a moment, he finally spoke and said that cooperation was fine. Hearing that answer, Mukong froze in place, his eyes widening in shock as he did not expect Chen to agree so easily. But before he could say anything, Chen spoke first and said that the profit would be split 9-1. He would take 9 parts, and Mukong would only get 1. Hearing that, Mukong frowned and replied sarcastically, saying that if it was 9-1, Chen might as well rob him directly. At that moment, a system notification appeared, showing that a strong negative emotion had been detected from Mukong, with shock increasing by 40 points. Chen waved his hand and told Mukong that if he was not willing, then there was nothing more to discuss. Hearing that, Mukong quickly grabbed Chen's leg and changed his tone, suggesting an 8-2 split. He said 8-2 should be fine, and complained that he also needed to eat and survive. At this point, he basically started begging loudly, tears flowing as he acted pitiful. Inside his mind, he thought that Chen was very confident, and must have a hidden trump card. He felt that apart from him, there was no one more suitable to cooperate with. After thinking for a moment, Chen finally agreed. He said that 8-2 would work. However, he added another condition. In the future, if any new goods were obtained, he would get the first pick. Whatever he left behind would be sold by Mu Chang. Mu Chang finally gave in and admitted defeat. He said that Chen wins. After the agreement was confirmed, Chen told him that the next step was to figure out the stronghold structure and how the personnel were arranged. After a few hours, they arrived at Liu Yang's base. Pointing ahead, Mu Kong told Chen that the place ahead was Liu Yang's stronghold. The trading area was located at the front. People who lacked water either paid money for it or exchanged other items. Inside the stronghold, several armed men patrolled the area with weapons in their hands. There were also many women who had been captured. They were forced to provide so-called special services for the upper management. One woman in a red dress was brought forward while men surrounded her, watching closely. It was Lin Wancheng. She stood alone in the factory area, covering herself as many men looked at her with lust in their eyes. Fear was clear in her eyes as the lights from the machinery glowed behind her. Mu Kong then pointed to the back area of the compound. A large water storage tank stood in the open space. Mu Kong told Chen that the water storage area was located in the back, but the exact position was still unclear. After hearing all that, Chen explained the plan calmly. He said he would sneak inside first to investigate. He told Mu Kong that once the signal appeared, he should create chaos at the perimeter to draw away the main guards. Hearing this, Mu Kong was shocked. He asked how Chen planned to move the water alone if he went in by himself. Chen jumped and told Mu Kong calmly that he had his own methods. He then leapt through the air, landing near stacked containers inside the facility. Armed guards patrolled the area, unaware of what was about to happen. Chen changed his clothes and walked forward inside the compound, covering his mouth casually as he moved. Suddenly, a guard noticed him and raised his weapon. The guard shouted, telling him to stop. He said that Chen looked unfamiliar and demanded to see his identification. The situation immediately became tense as Chen was stopped inside the restricted area. Chen took out a paper and told the guard that Boss Liu had sent him to count the water stock. He showed his card as proof. Hearing that, the guard laughed and said that counting water stock sounded fake. He asked if Chen was trying to trick a child. As he spoke, the guard raised his weapon and pressed it closer, clearly not believing him. At that moment, a system notification appeared, stating that negative emotion had been detected and mockery points were gained. Seeing that, Chen remained calm. He placed his hand on the guard's shoulder and thought that before he had only used his spatial cut to slice apples, but today he would cut something different. In the next second, Chen moved. A sharp spatial slash flashed through the air and struck the guard. The guard's eyes widened in shock as the attack hit him. He let out a painful cry and collapsed to the ground, unable to stand. The guard's expression twisted in agony as blood sprayed out. He cried out in pain and fell motionless on the ground. Another system screen appeared, detecting strong negative emotions, horror and pain. Hearing the commotion, a second guard rushed forward with a gun. Seeing the first guard's body on the ground, the second guard shouted angrily. He aimed and fired, bullets flashing through the dark. Chen twisted his body, dodging the bullets, and swung the green spatial blade again. The attack cut through the air and reached the guard. The guard's face filled with fear as he fired again. Gunfire echoed, but the green blade sliced across the guard's body, cutting him into two pieces. The guard screamed one last time as fear and despair surged through him. A final system notification appeared, showing strong negative emotions, fear and despair. Gunshots suddenly rang out across the area. Other guards shouted that an intruder had sneaked in and told everyone to hurry up. Armed guards rushed forward with their weapons raised. They spread out quickly, searching the area while moving toward the source of the noise. One man fired his gun while turning a corner, but little did they know that the intruder, Chen, stood calmly nearby. While Chen was hiding, a hand suddenly reached out from the darkness and grabbed him. Chen turned sharply to look back, his eyes cold and focused. At the same time, guards gathered around the large water storage tank. More people arrived, surrounding the area as they began a full search. Several armed guards moved toward a nearby building, pointing their weapons and checking inside. Shadows filled the area as more guards closed in from all directions. The one who grabbed Chen from behind turned out to be Li Yu. the woman Chen had saved in Chapter 2. Li Yu raised her finger to her lips, signaling Chen to stay quiet. Both Chen and Li Yu crouched beside a metal building to hide. Chen asked why she was there. Li Yu told Chen that she had been captured. She then asked if he had been captured too. Hearing that, Chen asked if she knew where the water stockpile was. Li Yu replied that they had made her clean up, so she had already figured out the layout and could take him there. However, there were too many guards outside. Suddenly, both Chen and Li Yu noticed something. They turned and saw a metal bucket, and quickly formed a plan. As the armed guards rushed forward searching, a heavy crash suddenly echoed as the metal bucket fell to the ground in front of them. The guards noticed the movement and shouted that someone was over there. They raised their weapons and rushed forward, urging each other to move quickly. But when they arrived, they only saw a metal bucket. Meanwhile, in a dark alley behind them, Li Yu led Chen away. She told him to follow her and said there were no surveillance cameras along that path. They ran together through the narrow passage, avoiding everyone who was searching for them. After Li Yu led Chen to the place where Li Yong was hiding the water, Chen told Li Yu to find a place to hide and wait for him to come back out. Li Yu looked at him quietly and nodded. Chen then walked toward a metal door. He raised his hand, and blue energy gathered around it, forming an energy ball. Chen placed his palm against the surface and slammed the energy into the wall. The energy spread outward in waves as he pressed harder. The blue light burst forward, and the door reacted under the force of his hand. With a loud explosion, the wall shattered. Rocks and debris flew everywhere as Chen burst through. The entire gate exploded with a massive blast, shocking a guard who was patrolling inside. The stunned guard stared at the hole in the wall and shouted in fear, asking who it was and how they got in. Seeing the guard, Chen's red eye glowed in the darkness. In the next second, he moved with lightning speed as a red light flashed. Before the guard could fight back, his neck was struck down instantly. Blood splashed as his expression froze in terror. A cold system screen appeared, showing that strong negative emotions had been detected. Shock, fear, and pain surged all at once. Li Yu slowly opened the warehouse door and peeked inside. She looked worried as she spoke, saying that Chen Xiao had been inside for a long time and wondering if something had happened to him. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the place. Flames and debris burst out, and rocks flew through the air. Li Yu rushed forward in shock. Smoke filled the warehouse as burning pieces fell around her. She grabbed a brick tightly with both hands, her face tense. Through the smoke, she noticed a dark human figure standing ahead. Startled, she turned toward the shadow. The next moment, she screamed and swung the brick down with all her strength. Before it could hit, Chen stepped in front of her. He caught the attack easily. They stood face to face, staring at each other at close range. Chen spoke calmly, saying it was handled and that they should leave. He walked forward without hesitation, while Li Yu followed behind him, still shaken. After coming out of the warehouse, Chen took out the gun he bought from Mu Kang. He raised the gun, and a shot was fired straight into the sky. It was a kind of firecracker. A bright flash exploded above the buildings, lighting up the night. Li Yu looked up in surprise, her hand covering her mouth. Chen stood in front, wearing a faint smile, completely calm. From a distant rooftop, Mu Kang watched the scene while holding a bottle. Fireworks burst in the sky as he commented that Chen Xiao was not bad at all. He then pushed a cart forward at high speed. Inside the cart were several glass bottles, all burning with flames. From above, the flaming bottles were thrown down one after another. The bottles spun through the air as fire wrapped around them. They crashed into the factory below. Flames burst out and spread across the buildings. Thick smoke rose into the sky as the fire grew stronger. Inside the factory, people shouted in panic. They yelled for the fire to be put out. Someone realized what it was and shouted that it was an incendiary bomb, telling everyone to run. Meanwhile, on a rooftop, Chen ran while looking back at the spreading flames. Fire burned on all sides. Li Yu led the way, telling Chen that this path would lead them out through the south gate. Just then, Chen felt that someone was following him from behind. His face darkened when he saw who it was. It was Lin Wanqing. She rushed toward him through the flames and grabbed onto him tightly. With tears streaming down her face, she begged him to take her along. She said she wanted to leave this place with him. She pleaded, reminding him that they were once lovers. She cried and promised that if he took her away, she would not blame him for using her name to take out loans. Her voice trembled as she begged again and again. Hearing that she wouldn't blame him, Chen Xiao looked down at her without warmth. He let out a quiet laugh and told her that she did not understand the situation at all. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she stared at him in despair, her face filled with regret and pain. Tears fell from Lin Wanqing's eyes. Her face trembled as fear and regret filled her expression. The scene shifted to her memories. Inside the room, she was trapped. She said they forced her every day and made her serve those old men. She said that if she resisted, they beat her. If she tried to run, they caught her and dragged her back. She cried and said she had nowhere else to go. She begged Chen Xiao to let her live with him, saying she would do anything for him. Chen Xiao leaned close and spoke in a low voice. He reminded her of the past. He said she laughed at him for being poor, called him useless, slept with old men behind his back, betrayed him, and led Liu Yang to kill him. He asked her if she had ever thought this day would come. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at him, unable to speak. Chen remembered his past life, where he was lying on the ground, pierced by metal rods, while Lin Wanqing and her lover stood around him in the red-lit darkness. Remembering all that, Chen felt cold and heavy. In his mind, he asked her that in the past life where she had betrayed and killed him, if she had ever thought this day would come. Scenes from the past appeared in his mind again. She had held a blade and hurt him while others watched. Blood stained his body as he screamed in pain. That memory was clear and cruel. In the present, Chen moved. He kicked her away without hesitation. Lin Wanqing fell hard to the ground, her acting exposed. He looked down at her and said her performance was still terrible. He turned his back on her and told Li Yu to leave with him. Li Yu hesitated, shocked, then followed as he walked away toward the burning factory. Lin Wanqing sat on the ground, watching them leave. Rage filled her face. She clenched her teeth and shouted his name, calling him ruthless. She declared that if she was not allowed to live, then she would make sure no one else lived easily either. Her anger burned as fiercely as the flames behind her. Chen's system screen suddenly appeared, showing that an intense negative emotion had been detected. The hatred level surged to an extreme value. On the other hand, inside the burning warehouse, Boss Lu shouted in panic, asking where the water was and whether the water was safe. The large metal door burst open. Boss Lu rushed in from outside with his men, holding guns as flames and smoke spread around them. Boss Lu looked around, but there was no trace of the water he had hidden. On a cracked wall, a message was written in red, warning Boss Lu that this time only his water had been taken, but next time his life would be taken instead. Boss Lu stared at the message in shock and fury. Veins bulged on his face as he shouted, demanding to know who had done this. A system screen suddenly appeared, showing that an intense negative emotion had been detected. The hatred level rose extremely high. Just then, Lu Wanqing collapsed on the ground in front of him, crying. She said it was Chen Xiao. She claimed she tried to stop him, but he injured her and insulted Boss Lu. She got close to Boss Lu and continued speaking, saying that Chen Xiao called him trash and said he was unworthy of owning these resources. She hugged Boss Lu and said that Chen Xiao wanted to kill all of them. She was clearly making Boss Lu angry at Chen, and it worked. Boss Lu's face twisted in rage. He clenched his fist and shouted for everyone to follow him to the south gate and kill Chen Xiao. At the south gate, some open barrels lay scattered as sparks fell to the ground. Chen calmly commented that it was quite a commotion. Mu Kong asked Chen to explain what had happened. Right in front of them, Boss Lu stood alone with his men. His expression dark and angry. Chen Xiao stood calmly, holding a burning torch in his hand. He looked relaxed and even smiled, saying Boss Liu had arrived quickly. Boss Liu pointed forward and roared, ordering his men to go and get Chen Xiao. Several men rushed forward, gripping knives and weapons as they charged through the fire. Seeing them coming, Chen threw his burning torch toward the barrels, which were filled with explosives. They immediately caught fire and exploded, creating a firewall between Chen and Boss Liu's men. The flames surged higher, blocking the way. Seeing this, Boss Liu grew more and more furious. He shouted Chen Xiao's name loudly, swearing that he would kill him. A system notification appeared in front of Chen, showing that intense negative emotion, hatred, had been detected. Chen Xiao smiled and thanked Boss Liu. He said he would take these emotion points and signaled that he would kill Boss Liu. Seeing that Boss Liu grew even angrier, another system notification appeared, stating that negative emotion points had reached 3,000 and a new skill, Spatial Barrier, had been unlocked. After escaping from there, the scene shifted to Chen's house. Loose papers drifted through the night as Chen's building stood quietly, one window still glowing with light. Inside, Mu Kong laughed loudly while holding a glass of drink. He shouted, telling Chen that what just happened was too awesome. He joked that old dog Liu was probably tearing his house apart in rage right now. They were at the dinner table, and a hot pot was set on it. Meat slices, vegetables, and bottles were neatly arranged. 3 people, Chen, Mu Kang, and Li Yu sat together, eating as if nothing serious had happened. Li Yu looked at Chen Xiao while serving food. She thanked him sincerely. She said that if it were not for him, she did not know how much longer she would have been trapped in that terrible situation. Chen Xiao looked at her calmly and replied that they were old classmates, so there was no need to be so polite. Liu lowered her eyes and spoke softly. She said it was not just about manners. She said Chen Xiao made her feel that there were still people in this world worth trusting. Hearing that, Mu Kang smiled and teased them. He said the hero saves the beauty move was very impressive. Then he leaned closer to Chen Xiao and asked him directly how he did it. He pointed at the water bottles around them and asked if emptying the entire reservoir alone was some kind of magic. The view widened, revealing countless large water bottles stacked everywhere. The scale was shocking. Chen Xiao answered calmly. He said he had his own ways. He then told Mu Kang to focus on thinking about how to safely sell such a huge amount of water. Hearing that, Mu Kang got shocked, completely stunned by what he was hearing, as he had completely forgotten about this. Chen then turned to Li Yu and asked her another question. He asked why there was no news about her after junior high graduation. Li Yu lowered her head and answered slowly. She said that after graduation her family had accidents. Her expression darkened. In her mind, a memory surfaced. One day, when she returned to her house, she called out for her parents, but what stood in front of her was a dark door filled with blood. With a heavy heart, Li Yu finally revealed the truth. She said her parents went missing at the same time. Hearing that, both Chen and Mu Kang fell silent. They listened without interrupting, their expressions turning serious. Just then, suddenly, heat and smoke filled the room. Flames rose outside the building, shocking them completely. All three of them rushed to the window and saw the streets below burning. Mu Kang stared in shock, shouting that it was on fire outside. He couldn't believe his eyes. They looked through the CCTV Chen had placed around his building. On the television screens, chaos appeared. People were trapped, and a voice cried for help, begging someone to save the children. Seeing that, Mu Kang's anger burst. He slammed the table and shouted that this was Boss Liu doing. He accused him of trying to drive everyone to death. Chen and Li Yu stared at the burning scene in shock. Liu came to Chen and asked quietly if they should do something, but Chen didn't say anything. He watched the flames spreading everywhere. Innocent people screamed for help. They reached out desperately, begging to be saved, but seeing them, Chen remained calm. He realized that Boss Liu was trying to use morality and innocent lives to force him out, but Chen was no longer the same person from his past life, the kind fool who would sacrifice himself for others. Outside, Boss Liu shouted angrily. He called out Chen Xiao's name and threatened that if Chen Xiao did not come out, he would burn the entire area to ashes and see how long he could hide. One of Lu Haifeng's men praised him, saying the plan was wise. Even if the fire did not kill everyone, the smoke would. He said they should throw more fuel at the fire. Boss Liu stepped forward through the flames and mocked Chen, saying Chen Xiao was foolish to think he could fight him. He sneered and said this was only the beginning. The fire continued to spread, burning all the nearby buildings. Danger grew closer and closer as the fire continued to grow. Inside Chen's room, while watching the scene outside, Mu Kang panicked and warned Chen Xiao. He said they could not continue like this. The heat would spread inside. Even if they did not burn to death, they would be roasted alive or suffocate from the lack of oxygen. But Chen Xiao stood calmly in front of the computers. His expression did not change at all. Just a smile appeared on his face. In his heart, he thought that in a high-temperature apocalypse, it would be foolish not to install the highest-level fire protection system in a safe house. He slowly raised his hand and pressed a red button inside his system. Just as he pressed it, outside, a device on the building activated. A powerful stream burst out and sprayed forward like a cannon. The white force cut through the flames, pushing the fire back and suppressing it as it roared across the burning buildings. Next, some barrels were thrown and scattered across the ground. They released smoke, which formed a thick wall, blocking the way forward. They were filled with fire extinguishers, which immediately started extinguishing the fire around them. Watching from inside, Mu Kang stared at the screen in shock. He realized that the barrier blocking the fire was made from nano-grade aerogel. He couldn't believe it. This level of material was military grade. Seeing that, Liu covered her mouth in disbelief as she looked at Chen. She finally understood how the building was stopping the fire from breaking in. Outside, Boss Liu, standing in the flames, slowly lifted his head. He looked at the building ahead, his eyes cold and sharp. The fire reflected in his gaze as he sneered. He muttered that this was nothing but a struggle before death. One of Boss Lu's men raised a bottle and threw it with all his strength. The bottle flew through the fire and smoke. It exploded with a huge blast. The explosion shook the ground. Those fire extinguisher barrels were blasted away, and the flames surged higher. The explosion sent Boss Lu's men flying, injuring them. But Boss Lu didn't care. He shouted angrily, ordering them to keep going. He said he did not believe the other side's defense could last forever. Just then, one of his men panicked and yelled that the fuel was almost gone. He said the white mist was too terrifying. At that moment, Chen stepped out calmly, holding a megaphone. He spoke lightly, asking Boss Lu if he had played with fire long enough. He invited Boss Lu inside for a glass of ice water to cool down. Hearing that, Boss Lu and his men, who stood in formation on the burning ground, grew very angry. A red system screen appeared in front of Chen, saying it detected 888 strong anger negative emotion. Boss Lu clenched his fists and changed his mind. He said killing Chen Xiao would be too easy. He wanted something worse. In his thoughts, he claimed Chen's house for himself. It was fireproof, strong, and self-sufficient. He believed it was the perfect shelter. He laughed and said fire attacks would not work. If that was the case, he would tear away the last bit of civilization himself. He looked toward two people who were tied together. They were residents of Chen's building. They trembled in fear, their faces pale as they looked toward the danger. Chen stood silently, holding the megaphone. His eyes were cold and calm without fear. The flames continued to burn as their confrontation was far from over. Flames raged across the street as Boss Lu shouted in anger. He called out for Chen Xiao to come out and face him. He said people were suffering because of him and demanded that he stop hiding. Chen's aunt cursed him loudly, calling him a brat who had offended Boss Lu and dragged everyone into danger. She begged him to come out and take responsibility. Inside, Mu Kong stood firm with anger burning in his eyes. He said that Lu Haifang had gone too far and that if things became worse, he would rush out and fight him to the death. But Chen wasn't angry like that. Even after seeing Boss Lu using other people's lives to blackmail him, he understood that in this cruel world, being soft-hearted was no different from choosing death. Outside, Boss Lu laughed coldly. He mocked Chen Xiao for hiding like a coward and threatened to start hurting others if he didn't come out. Grabbing an old man by the collar, he warned that Chen Xiao would face a terrible death for what he had done. Watching from inside, Chen immediately recognized that old man as Grandpa Wang. Seeing him, he remembered his past life. On the burning street, injured Chen had once lain on the ground. At that time, beside him, this Grandpa Wang had knelt and given Chen some water so he could survive. He told Chen that as long as he stayed alive, there would always be hope. Remembering the past where Grandpa Wang helped him, Chen decided to do the same thing. He told Mu Kang to stay inside and protect Yu. He said he would go and settle the score with Boss Lu himself. Yu Atra looked at him with worry, but he had already made his decision. He stepped forward without hesitation. He opened his door and stepped outside. Flames spread across the street as smoke filled the air. Chen walked through the burning surroundings and spoke loudly, telling Boss Lu that the grudge was between him and Chen alone. It had nothing to do with anyone else. In the distance, Boss Lu held Grandpa Wang hostage and mocked Chen. He sneered and asked if Chen Xiao had finally come out of hiding. He laughed and said that if Chen Xiao wanted to play the hero, he should first pay back the money, hand over the water, and then leave his life behind. Only then might he consider letting the others go. Hearing those words, Chen repeated them softly with a faint smile. He asked if Boss Lu really thought he wanted to play the hero. Chen declared loudly that he had no interest in that. Hearing this, Boss Lu became confused. Chen looked at Boss Lu without fear and said that fighting and killing were boring and that it only damaged one's karma. Then he suggested another way to settle things. He said he had heard that Boss Lu used to run a casino, so he proposed solving the conflict using the method Boss Lu was best at. He suggested making a bet. Chen Xiao said that if Boss Lu won, everything he owned would belong to him. But if Chen Xiao won, Lu had to release Old Man Wang and leave the area immediately. Hearing this, Liu laughed loudly and agreed to the bet. He took out the gambling cup and accepted the challenge without hesitation. Liu declared that they would bet on the size of the points. One round would decide life or death. Saying that, he threw the cup forward with force, starting the deadly gamble. Chen Xiao caught it calmly, his expression steady and confident as he said that he would bet on big. A tense atmosphere filled the area as the two stood facing each other like enemies in a duel. Dice rolled inside the cups as both of them prepared for the gambling showdown. Boss Liu shook the cup confidently, his arm swinging with force. At the same time, Chen stayed calm and steady, showing no fear as he shook his own cup. They glared at each other fiercely, neither willing to back down. Both of them then moved even more fiercely, shaking their cups from all directions and leaving no gap. Then at the same time, both slammed their cups onto the table, ready to reveal the result. But before revealing, Boss Liu pressed a button hidden in his cup. A mechanism moved inside his cup, and all the dice turned, showing sixes. Boss Liu smirked as he lifted his cup first. 3 sixes appeared on the table. His followers instantly cheered loudly, shouting that their boss had won. Laughing proudly, he declared that it was 3 sixes, and that his opponent had lost. However, Chen remained calm. He slowly spoke, telling them not to rush because the winner had not yet been decided. As he said that, Chen used his space cut skill to split all 3 dice into pieces. Chen then lifted his cup, revealing the broken pieces of the dice underneath. Seeing that, Boss Liu and his men were shocked. Chen said that Boss Liu's dice did not seem very good. Chen's neighbors, who were Boss Liu's hostages, stared in shock as the dice broke cleanly in half. Chen then counted the total points again, and it came out to 21, higher than Boss Liu's supreme roll. Boss Liu stood frozen in disbelief. With a calm expression, Chen looked at Boss Liu and declared that he had lost. He ordered him to release the captive immediately. Boss Liu tried to speak but couldn't find anything to say, and that angered him. Boss Liu shouted, asking Chen how dare he cheat in front of him. A system notification suddenly appeared beside Boss Liu, showing that strong negative emotions had been detected. Chen gained 500 anger points. Furious, Boss Liu cursed and rushed forward, yelling at Chen to go to hell. He pulled out a knife and charged straight at Chen with murderous intent. Not far away, the captives watched with fear. They trembled as Boss Liu aimed at Chen. Meanwhile, Chen remained calm. A faint smile appeared on his face as he thought that it was just in time to test his new skill. Boss Liu lunged forward with the knife raised high, aiming to strike Chen down. The blade flashed under the dim light as he attacked without hesitation. But Chen moved to his side and dodged the knife. Before Boss Liu could reach him, something shot past him into the air at high speed. It was a smoke bomb, which flew past Boss Liu's face and slammed into the ground between them. In the next moment, a loud explosion erupted. Smoke and dust filled the area. Boss Liu's subordinates panicked and shouted for their boss. They rushed toward the smoke, calling out to him. When the smoke cleared, Boss Liu stood there coughing but alive. His men asked if he was okay. Boss Liu covered his mouth and said he was fine. Then he ordered them to go and find Chen immediately. As he looked ahead, he saw Chen standing right in front of him inside the smoke. Boss Liu pointed and told his subordinates that Chen was up ahead. Immediately, his men aimed their guns and began firing into the thick smoke. Boss Liu shouted angrily, ordering them to beat Chen to death without mercy. But suddenly, an energy slash came and cut down a man standing beside Boss Liu. Boss Liu heard a shout of pain and turned in shock. He demanded to know what was happening as chaos broke out in front of him. In the next moment, one more man standing in front of Boss Liu was struck by that energy attack and thrown aside. Seeing his men cut in half, Boss Liu just stood there with a knife in his hand. Through the smoke, Chen stood calmly, completely unharmed. Not a single scratch was on him. He remained standing there without fear. Boss Liu clenched his weapon and yelled that he didn't care how strong Chen was. He declared that there was no way Chen could dodge the next attack. With rage in his eyes, Boss Liu fired a missile with a rocket launcher, telling Chen to die. As the missile shot forward, Boss Liu declared that Chen's inheritance belonged to him alone. At that moment, a blue barrier formed around Chen as a system notification appeared, announcing that a spatial barrier had been activated. The missile slammed into the barrier with tremendous force, but it could not break through. The impact shook the surroundings, yet Chen Xiao remained standing calmly inside the barrier. The missile cracked and began to break apart. Boss Liu stared in shock. He could not understand what was happening. Even after the missile struck, it failed to harm him. Boss Liu couldn't believe his eyes that Chen could actually block a missile. Chen Xiao stood there quietly, looking down at them without fear. With a faint smile, he spoke calmly. He asked Boss Liu if he really wanted to lose in front of so many people. Then he coldly asked if Boss Liu wanted to go back on their bet. The next second, Chen used his space cut skill and sliced the missile into pieces in mid-air. As the missile fell to the ground, Chen walked toward Boss Liu with a calm face. Seeing him coming, Boss Liu became scared. The rocket launcher fell from his hand after he saw what Chen did. Chen picked up a knife from the ground and told Boss Lu that since he didn't even have a decent knife, he was not worthy of negotiating terms with him. Seeing Chen, Boss Lu realized that something was wrong. There was definitely something fishy. Chen looked at Boss Lu with a cold expression and said that he had looked for trouble with him time and time again, repeatedly challenging his bottom line. So this was the time to settle their score. Hearing that, Boss Lu felt a chill as he realized the situation was turning against him. In his heart, Boss Lu thought about the losses and how fighting further would only hurt him more. He began to consider that Chen's Safehouse and abilities were too valuable. He thought it was better to recruit Chen, so that he could earn back his previous losses with interest. He quickly changed his attitude and forced a smile. Sweating nervously, he said it was all a misunderstanding and suggested that they could be friends after the fight. Boss Lu tried to make peace, hoping to strike a deal and avoid further trouble. Boss Lu lay on the ground, sweating heavily. He looked up at Chen Xiao and begged him to listen. He said that killing him would only stain Chen Xiao's hands with blood. Desperate, he added that in this world, human life was cheap, but he could help Chen Xiao survive and live better. He quickly revealed that he had a batch of medicine, antibiotics like penicillin and cephalosporin. He asked if Chen Xiao understood how precious those medicines were now. Boss Liu explained that even a small infected wound could take a person's life. If Chen Xiao let him go, he promised to share the medicine. Chen Xiao listened quietly, his red eyes cold and unreadable. After a moment, he calmly said that in times like these, antibiotics were indeed valuable, like real currency. Then he leaned closer and told Boss Liu honestly that he had far more supplies stored than he could imagine. Boss Liu tried to smile and argued that Chen Xiao only had food and water, but no medicine. He warned that a single illness could be fatal. Finally, he suggested cooperation. He said the medicine was hidden in an abandoned factory in the West District, and only he knew the password. Chen Xiao looked down at Boss Liu and calmly said that it was all right. Then he patted Boss Liu's shoulder and added that tonight's matter would end there. Hearing that, Boss Liu quickly agreed. He said it was good that the misunderstanding had been cleared up. Chen Xiao put an arm around Boss Liu's shoulder and told him to go ahead. He said they could talk about the details another day. Boss Liu walked forward, rubbing his head, still shaken. Soon his men stepped closer and called out to him. Boss Liu regained his composure. He looked at his brothers and told them it was time to leave. With that, he led his men away into the night. After Boss Liu and his men left in a hurry, Chen Xiao stood alone on the empty street. Smoke drifted through the air, and the burning cars lit the night with orange flames. He lowered his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. He let out a quiet laugh, and thought to himself that a password alone could never stop him. Even without a password, he could still open the door. Later, he walked toward a group of people waiting near the stairs. He gently held Grandpa Wang's hand and told him that everything was fine now. He said all those people were gone. The others around them slowly relaxed, but Chen's aunt looked at Chen with anger in her eyes. Before she could say anything, she suddenly remembered that even Boss Liu couldn't do anything. Sweat rolled down her face as fear filled her eyes. At that moment, a system notification appeared, showing that fear had increased by 100 points. Grandpa Wang held Chen Xiao's hands tightly and thanked him with tears in his eyes. He said that Chen Xiao had saved his life. If he ever needed this old man in the future, he should just ask. Even though he was old and could no longer risk his life in a fight, he could still plant seedlings and help with chores. Chen Xiao gently told Grandpa Wang that he understood his feelings. He asked him to go back home first, lock the door, and get some proper rest. Later that night, the city was covered in a deep red glow under a blood-colored moon. As Boss Liu and his men walked through the alley, one of his men admitted that Chen Xiao had truly scared him. Boss Liu snorted coldly. He called Chen Xiao a rash young man and said there was no way he would really share the medicine. Cooperation? That was a joke. He took out a cigar and smiled darkly. He said he had only been stalling. First, he would steady Chen Xiao and wait until he got the supplies into his own hands. After that, he would decide how to kill him. In his eyes, Chen Xiao was still too inexperienced to fight him. Hearing that, one of the men grinned and praised Boss Liu, saying that the boss was truly wise. He mocked Chen Xiao for daring to fight against him, and said he doubted Chen Xiao would survive more than 3 days. Boss Liu's expression slowly turned serious. He admitted that something about Chen Xiao felt wrong. Even artillery shells had not been able to get close to him. That alone proved Chen Xiao was not ordinary. He calmly told the red-haired man, whom he called Pineapple Head, to spend the next few days investigating Chen Shao carefully. But before he could finish speaking, something sudden and very bright sliced through the air. A strange force struck Boss Lu's neck without warning. Blood burst from his neck as his eyes widened in shock. The cigar slipped from his hand. His men froze in fear. They stared at him in horror and shouted that they had seen a ghost. Panic spread among them as they screamed and ran. Moments later, Boss Lu's body lay motionless on the cold ground of the alley. Under the red moon, the narrow street fell silent once again. Under the red sky, Chen Shao stood quietly on the rooftop. He looked down at Boss Liu below with calm eyes. Stretching out his hand slightly, he said softly that Boss Liu's story had ended forever. The next morning, an emergency broadcast spread across the city. It announced that the global high-temperature disaster was completely out of control. Many climate tipping points had been broken, and the ecosystem was close to collapse. The authorities officially advised people to make a choice based on their situation. They could migrate north to temporary shelters built by the government, or they could stay where they were and wait for rescue. The broadcast repeated that this was not a drill. Standing in front of the window, Chen Shao listened silently. He thought that going north to the so-called Pure Land would only lead to another disaster. Waiting for rescue was even more unrealistic. In his heart, he knew the real nightmare had only just begun. He remembered from his previous life, seeing a giant snake lift its head. Its red eyes glowed fiercely as it opened its mouth wide. Chen knew that soon something even more terrifying was about to happen. In the burning world, strange changes began to occur. Heat-resistant mutant beasts appeared. They were not afraid of the extreme temperatures. With glowing eyes and huge bodies, they roamed freely, ready to devour everything humans had built. Among humans, some people awakened special powers. These awakened ones began to form their own groups to fight for food, water, and supplies. In the struggle for resources, they did not hesitate to fight and even kill each other. Chen Shao understood this clearly. He knew that guarding his safe house was not enough. He wanted to turn it into the final fortress for survival in this apocalypse. Outside, people gathered in front of his building. They shouted angrily that they were starving and that their homes had been burned to ashes. They called Chen Shao, asking what he was doing now. The crowd grew angrier. They complained that Chen Shao was occupying such a big and strong fortress all by himself. Inside, he had food, drinks, and even air conditioning, while everyone else was starving in the heat. They questioned what right he had to live like that. Some of them shouted for him to come out. They blamed him for refusing to help earlier, and said that everyone's suffering was his fault. They demanded an explanation. One man stepped forward and declared that they had already decided. Chen Shao had to share the safe house. Everyone would take turns living inside it. They claimed it was for the sake of collective survival. While the crowd banged on the door outside, Chen Shao remained calm inside his apartment. He stood in his cool kitchen, quietly cooking a steak. The sound of sizzling meat filled the room. Music notes floated lightly in the air, and everything inside felt peaceful. After plating the steak neatly, he even took out his phone and snapped a photo of the meal. The temperature inside the room showed a comfortable 22 degrees. He then posted that photo in the society group chat. Soon, comments began to appear online. People were shocked that he was still eating steak. They complained that they could not even get water to drink. Yet he was still using air conditioning. Some angrily called him selfish and said he was doing it on purpose. But Chen Shao did not seem to care at all. A system screen appeared in front of Chen Shao. It showed that jealousy had increased by 150 points, anger by 130, and despair by 95. The negative emotions from outside were rising quickly. Looking at the phone in his hand, Chen Shao smiled faintly. He calmly thought that incompetent fury was the cheapest emotion in the apocalypse. Outside, one of the men stared at his phone with wide eyes, his face twisted with rage. He cursed loudly, saying that Chen Shao refused to share even a simple toast, yet he was eating steak and living comfortably. He swore that he would kill him. In his anger, the man smashed his phone hard onto the ground. Some time later, Chen Shao opened his door to go outside, saying he would first scout the abandoned factory in the West District. But just as he stepped outside, the hot wind blew fiercely against his face. Chen blocked it with his arm as the scorching heat filled the air. Sweat slid down his face because of the intense temperature outside. Just as he looked ahead, a sharp blade suddenly flew toward him at high speed, cutting through the air. Chen Shao's eyes narrowed slightly as he sensed the danger. He immediately dodged as a heavy cleaver flew past him at high speed and slammed into the thick door with a loud clang. The blade stuck into the door, trembling from the impact. From the front, several men rushed forward angrily. One of them shouted loudly that if Chen Xiao did not give up the house today, they would cripple him. The bald man charged at Chen Xiao first, raising another cleaver in his hand. His face was full of anger as he swung the weapon forward. But before the attack could land, Chen Xiao moved. He stepped forward calmly and closed the distance in an instant. He moved with terrifying speed, and seeing him, the bald man's eyes widened in shock. At the same moment, Chen Xiao grabbed the man's wrist tightly, stopping the cleaver from falling. With a sharp twist of his arm, Chen Xiao bent the attacker's arm backward. The man screamed in pain as his body was forced to bend with the motion. The fight had just begun, but Chen Xiao had already taken control of the situation. Chen Xiao reacted instantly when the attack came. The bald man tried to swing the cleaver down with full force, but Chen Xiao moved faster. In mid-air, Chen Xiao raised his arm and blocked the attack directly. The blade stopped just inches away. With a quick motion, Chen Xiao grabbed the bald man's wrist tightly and then forcefully seized the cleaver from the bald man's hand. At that moment, another man rushed in from behind, raising his own cleaver and preparing to strike Chen Xiao. Chen Xiao's eyes turned cold as he saw the second attacker. Before the second attacker could land his blow, Chen Xiao moved again. The attackers tried to surround him, swinging their weapons wildly from all sides. But Chen Xiao twisted his body and countered with incredible speed. Blades flashed through the air as he overwhelmed them with multiple strikes. Chen Xiao didn't stop there. In the next instant, Chen Xiao struck back. A powerful slash cut across all of the attackers. Blood sprayed as they collapsed to the ground. They had rushed in with confidence, thinking they could easily overpower Chen Xiao. But in just a few moments, the fight had completely turned against them. An orange-haired man crashed onto the ground, his face covered in blood. He groaned in pain as the impact shook his body. Standing over him, Chen Xiao held the cleaver calmly. His presence alone made the air feel heavy and terrifying. The orange-haired injured man shouted angrily, asking if he really dared to kill people in broad daylight. He pointed out that many people were watching. At that moment, a red system window appeared in front of Chen Xiao, showing that he had gained 1,000 fear points. Chen Xiao looked down at him coldly. The man on the ground trembled and asked nervously if Chen Xiao was going to kill him. Chen Xiao looked back at the other attackers lying on the ground, badly injured and unable to move. Sweat poured down their faces as fear filled their eyes. Chen Xiao said that killing them would only dirty his hands. Killing them directly would be letting them off too easily. He slowly walked away, leaving the injured men behind on the ground. His voice echoed calmly as he explained that in this hot weather, wounds could easily become infected. Ulcers, infection, and even sepsis could follow. For them, that slow suffering would be far worse than a quick death. Chen Xiao's cold voice echoed in the air. He said that in just a few days, they would slowly rot in pain. The scene then shifted to another place. It was the West District factory. The factory building stood quietly under the sunlight. Rusted metal walls and old pipelines surrounded the area, making the place look deserted. Chen Xiao walked near one of the buildings. As he looked around, his eyes suddenly stopped on something mounted on the wall. It was a surveillance camera. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and used his space cut skill. A sharp, blue streak of energy shot out from his fingers like a blade. In the next instant, the energy cut straight through the camera. The lens shattered instantly, and broken glass scattered as the camera was destroyed. Chen Xiao walked toward the factory door and raised his arm. Blue energy streaks flashed through the air around the entrance as he cut down the door. Without hesitation, he pushed the door open and stepped inside the building. The moment he entered, a strange green smoke began spreading through the room. The gas filled the air and quickly surrounded him. It carried a strong and irritating smell that burned his nose. Chen Xiao suddenly coughed and covered his mouth. He immediately realized what it was. It was poison gas. His breathing became difficult as the gas spread deeper into the warehouse. Chen Xiao's body began to feel weaker with every breath he took. His expression darkened as he understood the situation. This was not an accident. It was a trap. Inside the warehouse, two figures appeared behind Chen Xiao. They watched him through the poisonous smoke while he struggled to stay standing. Chen Xiao covered his mouth with his hand and kept coughing. The poison gas filled his lungs, making it hard for him to breathe. Sweat rolled down his face as his body felt weaker. At that moment, a man wearing a gas mask stepped forward from the smoke. He held a syringe and injected something into Chen's arm. Just as he did that, Chen suddenly felt a very strong effect in his body. He was shocked. The masked man holding the syringe looked down at Chen Xiao. He spoke in a relaxed tone and asked if Chen Xiao was feeling any better. He explained that the nerve gas inside the warehouse was not deadly, but it was extremely unpleasant and could weaken the body. Chen Xiao slowly raised his head and looked at the masked man with sharp eyes. Still coughing, he asked who these people were. Inside his mind, Chen Xiao quickly thought about the situation. He wondered why there were guards here and why Boss Lu had never mentioned them. For a moment, he suspected that Boss Lu might have set him up. However, after looking carefully at the two people in front of him, Chen Xiao felt that they did not seem truly malicious. The masked man finally introduced himself. He calmly said that his name was Lin Guodong, and he was a biomedical researcher. Professor Lin calmly continued his explanation. He said that his research focused on human evolution in extreme environments. His work studied how the human body could change and adapt when facing harsh conditions. Then he pointed toward the woman beside him and introduced her. He explained that she was his student, Su Ru. He also mentioned that he was the person in charge of this place. Su Ru stood nearby holding a metal case. She smiled politely and simply greeted Chen Xiao with a friendly hello. Professor Lin then explained that the poison gas outside was only a security system. It was placed there as an anti-theft measure to stop intruders. However, Professor Lin seemed more curious about something else. He adjusted his glasses and looked closely at the door. He said he was very curious about the tool Chen Xiao used earlier because the incision he made was extremely unique. Chen Xiao listened carefully and slowly caught his breath. He thanked Professor Lin for saving him, but when he heard the words biomedical researcher, he felt surprised. His eyes moved around the warehouse as he began to observe the place more carefully. Inside the room were many refrigerators and shelves filled with bottles and samples. The environment clearly looked like a secret laboratory. As Chen Xiao continued looking around, his gaze suddenly stopped. In the dim green light of the room stood a terrifying skeleton of a dinosaur. Its skull was large, and its sharp teeth were exposed. Chen Xiao looked around the room carefully. The place looked like a strange laboratory filled with large machines and glass tanks. A huge metal door labeled Gate EO7 stood nearby, and a glowing container bubbled with liquid beside it. Seeing all of this, Chen Xiao wondered if the place even looked like a medicine storage room. Professor Lin walked toward a large refrigerator filled with different medicines and bottles. He calmly told Chen Xiao that if he needed medicine, he could take whatever he wanted. Professor Lin smiled slightly and said Chen Xiao should consider it an apology for the strict security measures earlier. He also called it a small gift for their first meeting. Hearing that, Chen Xiao did not hesitate. He stepped forward and opened the refrigerator. Inside were many kinds of medicines neatly arranged on the shelves. He began taking several bottles and boxes and placing them inside his backpack. Among them was a bottle labeled Baybacter, along with several other medicines and supplies. After packing what he needed, Chen Xiao closed his bag and looked back. He simply thanked Professor Lin. Chen Xiao walked toward the exit after finishing his business. Professor Lin stood quietly inside the building, watching Chen Xiao leave through the door. As Chen Xiao's figure slowly disappeared into the bright light outside, Professor Lin adjusted his collar slightly and smiled faintly. In a calm voice, he murmured that they would meet again. Outside, the evening sun painted the sky orange as birds flew across the sky above the tall buildings. Chen Xiao reached his apartment and pushed the door open. His body looked tired after everything that had happened. Leaning against the door, he let out a long breath. In his mind, he thought about what had happened earlier. Although Professor Lin had saved him and did not make things difficult for him, something still felt strange. The way Professor Lin looked at him made Chen Xiao feel uneasy. That strange gaze gave him chills. Just then, a message came in the homeowners group chat on Chen Xiao's phone. Someone in the group was asking desperately if anyone had antibiotics or hemostatic medicine. The message said they were willing to buy it at a high price. Seeing the message, Chen Xiao looked at the medicines he had just collected. He thought that the few boxes he had taken should work very well, but he quickly made a decision. He posted a reply saying that he had a few boxes, but they were not for sale. Very soon, the group chat exploded with angry messages. Several people started cursing at him. One man angrily called Chen Xiao a selfish villain. Another shouted that Chen Xiao was shameless and threatened that once they recovered, they would come to his door and kill him. Others also yelled at him and told him to just wait. At that moment, a red system window appeared. It showed that he had received anger plus 99, hatred plus 200, and jealousy plus 380 from the people in the chat. Chen Xiao then sat down by the door with his backpack beside him and quietly opened it. Inside were many kinds of medicine he had collected earlier. As he looked through the bag, his eyes suddenly stopped on something strange. There was a small device hidden inside. Chen Xiao's expression changed immediately. He realized what it was. It was a tracker.